Chapter 41. Aftermath, Starlight I. Aya! Enough! No more interference. Soldier Boy recovers just as fast, turning towards Starlight, his body resuming his death glow brighter than before. Time slows as she feels the heat radiating off him, stinging her skin, burying itself inside of her. She sees the mutated faces of Butcher and M shouting, but the sound takes its time to reach her ears. Her eyes turn back to her assailant. The small movement takes an eternity, as the red intensifies. Her stomach drops and knees tremble. She is weak. The radiation is making her weak. She sees it happening but can't move. I'm going to die, is the single clear thought that resonates as certainty. Annie! The scream hits like a wave. In a blur, he's there, enveloping the glowing death from behind. His eyes meet hers and a shiver goes up her spine, lightning fast. In another explosive blur, they are both gone, time resuming its normal course as the sound of the crashed window and wall reaches all of them. Homelander saved me, was the first thought that popped into her mind as she watched the confused looks of everyone around her. He saved all of us. She didn't have time to finish the thought as a flash of red and TRAAKNGG. The building shook along with crashing sounds of broken glass, steel beams falling and cement scraping. Cherry! Frenchie says as he rushes to Kimiko. His scream brings everyone out of their shock. Huey! She says loudly, mostly to herself, while rushing to his side. What the fuck was that? Dem asks as he rushes to the window. Hopefully that's cunt boy blowing up Homelander. She hears Butcher say as he joins M by the opening in the side of the building. YEA and half of Manhattan with him. She hears M say with fury. Allying with that madman. Huey! She screamed as she saw he was bleeding from his mouth and having a hard time breathing, along with a bruise starting to swell on the side of his head. She tries to help him but is distracted by a desperate call from Frenchie. Guys! She turns and sees Frenchie and Kimiko, the girl already recovered, backing away from a slowly advancing Noir. Well, the little black dog wants to keep playing. She hears Butcher say while ignoring the furious looks from M. An attack dog without a master, well, that won't do. We'll just have to put you down now, won't we? A sputtering cough brings her attention back to her boyfriend. Her resolve steals and she screams. Enough! Everyone's attention is on her. She turns to them with righteous fury. Butcher! Noir! Stand down! Now, the lights flicker all around them and her eyes start glowing. Noir stops for a moment to look at her, tilts his head to the right, then relaxes his stance and gives her a mock salute. Good dog! Butcher quips, which only enrages her. You selfish prick. She starts advancing on him. Huey is dying and you want to keep fighting. That seemed to bring Butcher back to reality as a pang of shame colored his features. Huey! He said as he rushed to the replacement little brother. Look at all this destruction. Soldier Boy could have brought the whole building down. Thousands could have died. Butcher looked at her from Huey's side with resigned determination. It wasn't supposed to go down like this. The plan was. Man, your plans are always fucked up. They never work. M said, frustrated. But this, Butcher. This takes the fucking cake. M said resentfully, looking out the city skyline. I see at least half a dozen buildings with damage, debris falling everywhere. How many people died tonight because of you? He said with anger as he turned back towards the group. How much blood until you are satisfied? She could see Butcher was about to respond, so she interfered. Enough. No more fighting. Huey needs help. We need to take him to a hospital. Butcher reluctantly nodded, and so did Butcher picked up Huey and carried him as they made their exit to the stairs. As she passed the Chapter 42. Aftermath, Starlight 2. Until this compound runs out in a few hours, like you said, there isn't much we can do. The internal bleeding has stopped by itself and we tubed him to deal with the perforated lung. Starlight listened aptly to the doctor describing Huey's condition to her Butcher and Huey's dad, Hugh Campbell. As next of kin, it was he who could authorize any procedures to be made on Huey, so they had to bring him in. So I'm not too worried about that. It's the brain injury that worries me. He said. 6 hours. It had taken 6 hours until the doctors were able to see Huey and perform all the tests needed to assess his situation. The emergency rooms around the city were packed with injuries, both minor and major, from the earlier battle between Homelander and Soldier Boy. The swelling from the blunt force trauma is manageable with anti-inflammatory medication, but it's the lesions that I can't do anything about. That brought her back to reality. Lesions? Hugh Campbell asked. Yes, lesions. The scans indicate his brain has suffered damage all over outside of the blunt force trauma he just received. Not only that, but there are some small growths of tumors in various places. Has he ever experienced? Starlight, out of the corner of her eye, caught Butcher suddenly stiffening up, falling and shaking. Seizures, the doctor finished loudly as he moved to the falling Butcher. To his credit, the doctor immediately mobilized Hugh and asked him to put his hands underneath Butcher so as not to hurt his head. Not that Butcher could, since he was still doped up on 24V. The doctor continued yelling in code over the phone as a bunch of nurses flooded into the office. We'll have to continue this conversation later. You can go back to the waiting area or home. We will call you if there is any change in Huey's condition. And with that, he rushed them out of the room. I'm going to stay, the father said. They might need me. You should go home. It looked like you've been through a lot today. Starlight silently agreed and hugged the man. As she made her way out of the hospital, she realized there might not be a home to return to. The tower might still be off limits, and she has no idea if her apartment was damaged in the fight. Her thoughts were interrupted by the buzzing vibrations of her phone. Ashley was video calling her. Hello, she said with curiosity as a disheveled Ashley appeared on screen. Oh, thank God. Starlight, you need to come to the tower. We need your help. They are trying to get him. You need to come back. Stoically looking Noir, she saw him sign rapidly with his hands and give her a nod once he was done. Confused, she turned to Frenchie for translation. The man's face scowled but translated nonetheless. He said the 7 need their light. Annie couldn't help but feel an anxious knot in her chest. Annie was taken aback by the rapid fire spewing from Ashley. Ashley, wait, slow down. What happened? She asked the flustered woman. The fucking feds happened. That's what. They're here to take Homelander. Noir fought them off. Fuck, we're so fucked. We're all going to jail. Fuck fuck. Annie could see Ashley was starting to lose it again. Ashley, slow down. What do you mean they are trying to take Homelander? Where is he? What happened with him and Soldier Boy? Martin's team picked Homelander up from Harlem a few hours ago. Wait, Martin Schultz, the CSO? She interrupted. Yes, the fucking CSO. Ashley answered exasperatedly. Homelander was hurt really bad. They've been operating on him ever since. That actually shocked her. If they were operating, that means he was powerless? The CIA somehow found out and put a team together to take him, with some fucking legal bullshit that our council is trying to fight right now. Wait, what happened to Soldier Boy? I don't know. Martin thinks Homelander threw him into the moon or something. Look, that doesn't matter. We need you here. I'm only here with A-Train, who is helping the police with cleanup. She continued. Deep is keeping Ryan away. That's right, Butcher said that Ryan had been there as well, another fuck-up on his part, and Noir is guarding the operating room. She paused. I've sent out a call to the other heroes, and some are coming in, but they need a leader. You're captain of the 7, you, A-Train and Deep need to show a united front. They'll follow you. We need to prevent them from taking Homelander. But if they have the legal right, what can we do? Fuck, Annie. We physically stop them. Ashley said, incensed. We buy time so our legal team can fight this. Look, Homelander is Vought. She said, exasperated. If they take him, it won't just be him. They'll take Maeve, and they'll take Ryan. Wait, Maeve? Why would they take Maeve? She interrupts Ashley. Because she's the strongest woman in the world, that's why. And she's currently unconscious and helpless. And what do you think will happen if they fuck up and can't contain John? He recovers and finds out they took his son again. She stopped and paused as she saw Starlight grimace. Look, Annie, this is a mistake waiting to happen. We can stop this. I need you to at least keep the rest in line so this doesn't escalate more than it needs to. We just need to buy some time, that's it. Please. Annie sighed and felt the knot of anxiousness grow larger and tighter in her chest. Homelander was hurt, technically an opportunity to end this, but it wasn't guaranteed, and Noir was guarding him. The government would try again, and with more heroes inbound it would surely escalate. More people would die. And if they took Maeve, Ryan and Homelander recovered, then even more people would die. She couldn't help but feel a string of despair resonate within her. Death, everywhere there was death. They were supposed to be heroes, to help people, to prevent death, not cause it. How did things go sideways so fast? She couldn't help but think. The 7 need their light. Noir's last words to her came knocking at the front of her mind. No, she was a hero. She wouldn't sacrifice more people just on a chance that Homelander could be taken down. I'm not like Butcher, she thought, and with a sad thought continued. Or like Huey. With steely eyes she looked at Ashley's image and responded. I'm on my way. Chapter 43. Aftermath. Ashley. The small vibration indicating that Ashley pressed the end call button on the screen was accompanied by the closing image of Starlight fading to black. Okay, good, Starlight is coming over. She whispered more to herself than anyone else, not that there was anyone else in her office. This can be salvaged, just need time for counsel too. She didn't get to finish as her office door opened and her assistant walked in. What do you have for me? She asked expectantly of her mini self. Mini Ashley's face scrunched with hesitation, as if she had just taken a Sour Patch Bear. Not good, no one's answering. The contacts at DOD are silent, and the few lower-rung aides that answered all said they had no idea about it but can't reach the senators now. Ashley felt anxiety building in her chest again, along with a fire of rage. Ayergurf. She let out a frustrated yell while her hands made to choke a non-existing person, making her mini-self shrink back in fear. Those fucking assholes. They smell blood and don't want to be caught on the wrong side of this. FUCK, she yelled. This is why you can't trust politicians. They will take votes money, but when it comes to a little information. She just shook her head in denial. Fucking assholes. Congresswoman Newman answered. She said FBS didn't know about the raid either, but she's looking into it. Her assistant tried to reassure her. Of course she didn't. Ashley's hands went to cover her face. Of course she fucking didn't. She took a few deep breaths to calm herself down. Just figure it out, he says. You're the CEO, she mumbled to herself, remembering the conversation she had with Martin when she pulled him out of the ode to warn him about the incoming agents. I shouldn't have done that, she thought as she started to bite her nails. No, it wouldn't have mattered, her consciousness changing course. Noir was going to be there anyway. She just reached the top and now it was all close to crashing down around her. Worse, it might drag her down as well and end up in prison. Martin outright said if he goes down he's bringing everyone else with him, and then Noir had to go and be a one-man fucking army. And now no one is picking up the phone. FUCK, she thought and bit harder on the nail in her right thumb. What would Stan do? Fuck. This never would have happened under Edgar. Fuck. Okay, calm yourself, what would he do? She thought rapidly. Okay, she thought and took a deep breath. He would play to his strengths. He would use his political connections and favors to squash this. But I can't do that because I don't have his contacts. And no one is fucking answering me. Her inner frustration realizing only as shaky closed fists on the outside. What are my strengths? I don't have the same connections as him. She shook her head. Because I spend every fucking waking second crisis managing selfish, egoistic, self-absorbed and incredibly stupid superpowered celebrities. Idiots who wouldn't be able to string 2 sentences tog. She suddenly stopped, her eyes widening in realization. Ashley, are you okay? She heard her assistant ask. Do you want me to get you anything? Maybe a band-aid? She asked reluctantly. Your thumb is bleeding. Her eyes looked down at her hand and saw the tiny red droplet going down her knuckle from the outside side of her nail. She had ripped off a bit too much skin trying to chew on the dead end. Her instant reaction was to bring it back to her lips and suck the remaining drip out. She held it there for a second, taking the time to formulate her thoughts. We're going live, she said as she removed the appendage from her mouth. What? The mini-her asked. The CIA wants to pull this shady shit in the middle of the night? Let's see how America feels about this. She paused. We promised more transparency, right? So let's shed some light on what just happened. She said with conviction. So live on TV? Mini Ashley asked. The studio's a mess, I don't think the crew can dash. Fuck TV. Ashley said. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. She paused. We'll go live on all of them at the same time. And finished with a smile. She wasn't Stan, but she had her own strengths. Chapter 44. Timeline. Timeline and date. I think Season 3 happens during 2021 with the last few episodes happening after Homelander's birthday special, which is July 4th. So I put the action for the last few episodes to happen towards the end of August or first week of September. For this story, I am moving the date up by 1 year, so chapters 1 through 35 happen during the last week of August, first week of September 2022. My reasoning is that in the show they have a presidential election coming up. In the real world the next election is 2024, and campaigning starts around 2 years before the election, so it fits nicely with the real world and makes future date calculations much easier for me. As I'm starting the time skip, I won't be providing exact dates, only months and years, and sometimes only years as we get further along the timeline. Chapter 45. Training with A-Train. Date. October 2022. As the warm sun rays of the cold fall morning fell gently on him, his eyes surveyed the bright but small clearing for any movements in the trees. his body only slightly tense in preparation to move at an instant's notice, not because of any so-called perceived danger, instead due to wanting to fulfill his task, and though he wouldn't really admit it, also because of the small thrill he was feeling. As usual, it was his ears that first picked up the telltale sign of the incoming target. Though to be technical, he was the target, and the other one was the pursuer. It only took a split moment for his pursuer to enter the clearing in what would be considered a way too fast blur for anyone else to follow, yet posing no strain on his eyes. He waited until the last possible moment to move, when his opponent felt the most confident, lunging hands forward towards his waist to grab the blue-colored flag tightly secured to his belt. In a smooth motion, he simply twirled out of the way, letting his now wide-eyed assailant fly by him, while at the same time removing the unprotected red-colored flag from his waist. The surprise move must have briefly startled his opponent, for he lost form and fell unceremoniously, causing his body to bounce off the ground multiple times as he struggled to stop his speedy momentum. "Too slow," he said with a big smile, happily waving the red flag as the dirt and grass-covered boy stopped finally in a forceful hover. "Damn it," the sullen boy said. "I thought I had you this time." "You were standing still," he finished as he floated towards him. "I was anticipating. It was a trap. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist trying to catch me off guard. All I'd have to do is wait for you to make your move, and simply move out of the way," he said with a smile as the blue and black spandex-wearing boy landed in front of him. "I used your eagerness and momentum to defeat you. Moving fast is more than just hurling yourself at the greatest speed possible. You have to anticipate, you have to think 10 moves ahead, otherwise you crash." "Ugh, but it's so hard, especially when we run through the forest. There are too many trees and branches in the way," he responded, frustrated. "And in the city there will be moving people and cars, which are more unpredictable than standing trees. I could just fly. It's easier when I fly, the skies are clear. I can go as fast I can," the boy responded. "That may be so, but the people that you will need to help are mostly going to be on the ground. You don't want to accidentally crash into them, do you? Accidentally hurt them?" he asked the young boy. "No, I don't," he said, somewhat resigned yet serious at the same time. "It's just you make it seem so easy. I'll never catch up to you." The older man chuckled good-naturedly at his words. "You know, Ryan, at your age I crashed into everything around me as well." "Then how did you get so good?" Ryan asked. "Practice, of course. Practice, 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 and I had a good coach," he said, his tone more solemn now. "My brother, he made me practice every day after school." "You sound like my dad now. Every day we have to train." His tone annoyed. "Well, how do you think he became the world's greatest hero?" A-Train asked rhetorically. Ironically, the last month was the most he'd ever seen Homelander train in any way, shape, or form since he'd been in the 7, but he wasn't about to tell that to the kid. "Now come on, it's almost lunchtime. Let's get you home, running no flying." Ryan sighed. "Fine. Dad. We're home," Ryan yelled as they stopped in front of the giant-sized open garage of the equally large mansion where the father and son duo now resided. Ironically, the estate was only a few miles away from where the Harrigasm house was in Vermont. Why Homelander chose this place, A-Train didn't know. Sure, it was a decent plot of land and it offered privacy, but in his opinion there were better places in New York and around the country than cloudy Vermont. "No need to yell, Ryan. I could hear you from miles away," Homelander responded. A-Train could see the leader of the 7 in the garage, where he was pulling with his right hand on a cable attached to a large and complicated machine filled with gears, weights and motors providing resistance to his slow and methodical movements. "How much are you pulling now, Dad?" Ryan asked enthusiastically. 50 tons. Homelander responded, not turning around to face them, his focus solely on the machine. "Wow." The boy was amazed. "That's so heavy. Is that why you're going so slowly?" he asked as we slowly walked up to him. Homelander was in a white t-shirt and dark training slacks. A-Train could see the lightly pink-colored scarred and crinkly skin running down the side of his neck through his right arm. His hair was shaved on the sides, and while he'd let the top grow longer, the dark strap of the eye patch was clearly evident. "It's not too heavy," he responded. "But I'm going slowly because I want to train my fine movement control under pressure. I could simply yank it like this," he said, and suddenly jerked his right hand backwards past his body, making the machine's motors whirl with a loud whizzing noise as they tried and failed to resist the motion. "But that wouldn't be help with what I needed. It's not always about strength. I need control as well, and for that I need to practice." A-Train could feel Ryan roll his eyes. He couldn't help but think he was going to be a handful once he's fully in his teen years. "Plus I don't to break the machine," Homelander finished as they all felt a distinct burning smell caused by metal rubbing on metal. He gently released the cable back to its slack position and turned to them. Now then, how did training go? Ryan slumped. I lost, again. Chapter 46. Super Dad. It was 4-1. He got me once. He's improving, only crashed 4 times. I would have caught you more if I could fly. It's not fair. Ryan said sullenly. We talked about this. Flying with me, only running when with a train. But it's not fair. He's so fast, and when I try to catch up I end up flying, but then I try not to and I end up crashing. A-Train watched as Homelander put a hand on Ryan's shoulder, striking the most perfect fatherly figure he'd ever seen. The scars and eye patch only adding to the image of the wizened father, imparting wisdom to the eager son. He had been surprised when Homelander approached him to train Ryan, then again being surprised by Homelander seemed to be the norm now. Flying is like a 5th limb you have. It's a brand new limb that you barely know how to use, and when moving fast you are trying to coordinate not 4 limbs but 5. You're not used to it, so you trip up. You just have to practice more. He heard the man say. Sometime in between having his attention taken by Blue Hawk and dealing with his family, something had changed with Homelander. In some ways he was like a completely different person, and in others he was more Homelander than ever. The man had become a workaholic. He'd taken a deep interest in all things Vought, more than that he was pushing for the retraining for all the heroes for better PR, as he called it, but also for better control of them. He'd been assigned to work on that project with Starlight, which honestly suited him just fine. Starlight had a keen mind, was easy to work with, and agreed with him on improving relations with the black community. He didn't mind her taking the lead, it was a win-win for both of them. That wasn't all. He felt more than conflicted and confused when he heard that it had been Homelander's idea to give him Blue Hawk's heart. He was still technically in recovery, but apparently the heart and his body had adapted to each other unlike the scientist had ever seen, though apparently this was the first of this kind of operation that was performed on supers. Now then, let me take a look at you. Make sure there's nothing broken or internal bruising. He heard Homelander say as he saw the man concentrate at looking at Ryan with his one good eye. How he dealt with Soldier Boy was also out of character, but he could see the PR moves he made. His and Starlight's ratings were through the roof. Savior of New York, they called him. Inwardly, A-Train scowled. Something about the whole situation stunk, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Still, through the chaos he'd thought about taking a shot at Homelander and helping the government when he heard Ashley's broadcast, but decided not to. Minor bruises, only that are already healing up. I don't see any problems. Homelander stated as he finished checking Ryan over. Come on, let's go inside. You need to shower and I'll set up lunch. He said and paused. A-Train, you're staying for lunch. There are a few things I want to talk to you about. He ordered more than requested. Sure. He answered as Homelander led them all inside. The thought had crossed his mind when he heard Ashley's broadcast, but he quickly realized the futility. Even if he took out Noir, what would happen then? The public already knew the government had made a move on Homelander in his weakened state. They would never forgive him for helping them, not to mention the other heroes that supported Homelander. That, and there was the surprising fact that Starlight was on the way to help Vought. From the time he spent with her, he could tell the girl had changed as well. There was something bothering her. Still, if that hadn't been a shock, then the conversation with Homelander he had when he was asked to train Ryan had been a game changer. He of course didn't fully trust Homelander, but if there was a shot to heal his brother he would take it. Homelander told him Vought's brightest were working on some game-changing serums, stuff that would revolutionize the world. He didn't care for the details, and the rant Homelander went on about changing humanity. As long as he could heal his brother he would do anything. He needed to do this for his family, for his niece and nephew, and for himself. All that Homelander had asked was for loyalty and to toe the line. That had been strange in itself. There were no physical threats or overtures about being kicked out of the Seven. The man instead had offered his support on bringing the A-Train brand back greater than ever before, and all he had asked was to essentially keep his mouth shut and do as he was told. It wasn't like he had much of a choice, so he readily accepted and pledged his support. Part of him felt sick, like he just swore fealty to a new king, but what could he do in his position? So, Homelander started as he took out large Tupperware boxes filled with pasta and chicken from the fridge. There are a couple of projects I need your help with dash. BZZT. Homelander was interrupted by the cell phone vibrating on the massive kitchen counter. 1 second. I have to take this, he said, gesturing to him as he picked up the phone. Hey Ashley. What? Slow down? Now? Why? What is she doing? We'll calm her down. A-Train heard Rapid voice talking on the phone but couldn't make out who it was. Okay, just do what you can. I'm with A-Train, we'll be there in a few minutes. The man said and hung up. Change of plans. We have to go to the tower. Starlight's threatening the scientists or something like that. What? That shocked him. Starlight? Are you sure? He was taken aback by the news. Yeah, that was Ashley. I think I know what this is about. I'll explain once we get there. He finished and waked towards the staircase, stopping right in front of it. Ryan! He shouted loudly. Something came up. Me and A-Train have to go to the tower. Okay, he heard Boy's response from upstairs. Lunch is on the counter, just microwave it, and I repeat, do not use your heat vision. I don't want to come back to a burned down house. Got it. There was no response for a moment. Ryan, do you hear me? Homelander asked again, more sternly. Yes, I got it. Good, and make sure to review those Khan Academy videos I told you. I'm showering. The annoyed response of the boy came back, accompanied by a door slamming closed. Homelander rolled his eyes. The adjustment has been. And he paused. Well, we are still adjusting. He trailed off with a small but somewhat frustrated smile. Let's get to the tower before Starlight takes it down. He said with a sigh. Chapter 47. Consequences. Having reached the tower, A-Train made his way up to the labs as quick as he could without destroying the stairs and doors. In the hallway, he could see a small crowd of people gathered outside the hallway doors, murmuring to themselves. Some of the scientists in lab attire, Ashley and her assistant, Rhonda the head of HR, Shauna the head of legal, and Martin the CSO, along with a few goons from the security force. Ashley, what's going on? He asked, getting their attention. Oh, A-Train, you're here. She turned around, surprised. A Homelander's handling the situation. Just as she finished, the lights flickered, accompanied by a blinding flash of light and loud bang. Enough! They all heard Homelander shout from inside. Homelander had beaten him by maybe 1 or 2 minutes to the tower. A-Train pushed past all of them and went inside to see what was happening. Damn it, Annie. Are you trying to bring the whole fucking tower down? He saw Homelander holding Starlight's hands up, restraining her by the wrists, with the woman struggling to break free. Let me go, she shouted. It's all your fault. You killed Alex, and now Huey is dying because of you. It's you, it's always you. With a burst of energy, she tried pulling her hands free once more, but it was a futile attempt. Homelander's grip didn't falter one bit. Let me go, she screamed once more. No, came his equally loud reply. A-Train saw she was about to speak, but Homelander continued in his aggressive tone. What did I say that night? He asked firmly. I told you if Huey keeps playing Butcher's game, he would get himself killed. I told you Butcher will get him killed. He doesn't care about any one of you, he's just using you to get to me. He paused for a moment as a reluctant Starlight absorbed his words. They stole 24V, and they chose to use it freely without knowing the consequences. No one at Vought made them do that. Homelander continued. Why do you think neither I nor Edgar released 24V for use? He asked. The compound wasn't ready. He stated flatly. That seemed to deflate the young heroine, but not fully. V made him like this, then V can fix him. Give me a dose, it's all I'm asking. She stated softer. A-Train now understood the situation. Starlight came to get a shot of Compound V, hoping to save Huey. Problem was, all V samples were now under lock and key somewhere in the building, known only to a few of the scientists, execs, and security team. No unauthorized personnel were allowed to touch the stuff, under threat of retribution from the big guy himself. Another change in Homelander when compared to over a year ago, when he stole a bunch of old samples and made him spread it around the globe. No. A-Train immediately saw Starlight's face scrunch up. You bastard. You want him dead. You knew and you said nothing. You dash. I couldn't care less about Huey. Homelander interrupted her. Dead or alive, he means nothing to me. He never posed a threat to me, it wasn't him I was ever worried about. Then let me save him, she said, exasperated, and struggled against his might grip once more. A-Train saw Homelander look at her, pondering her requests. How bad is he? The question threw her off, and she stopped struggling. He fell in a coma. The doctors said it could be a week, or it could be a month, they don't know. He saw Homelander's shoulders slump, and the man let out a small sigh. I can see why you're so desperate, he finally said. I'm going to let you go if you promise you won't attack anymore. Starlight nodded, and he released his grip. A-Train, can you bring Dr. Schultz back in here? The speedster was almost startled as he was addressed for the first time since intruding on this private yet not so private argument. No need. I'm here, the man said from behind him, who in fact did actually startle him this time. Luckily his reaction was all internal. Well, can V save Huey? Homelander asked the old scientist. No, he answered flatly. How can you know? You haven't tried. Starlight exclaimed. No, but I have spent my whole life studying V. the old man said firmly. I know how the compound works. From what you describe, your friend's situation is terminal already, and as I was trying to explain to you earlier, giving him V now would likely kill him outright. His body won't be able to handle the stress, and that's assuming he is compatible. He paused. V and 24V are related but not quite the same. They are not exactly interchangeable. The CSO said. I'm sorry, but as Homelander said, there is a reason why it's in the testing stage still. Even small amounts have proven to be deadly, much more so than V. But there has to be something you can do. I know you're working on some new compounds. She insisted. Sure, maybe in a year or 3 or 5, or maybe tomorrow. Martin said with a tinge of sarcasm. Our research is progressing in several avenues that could potentially help your friend and millions of others, but scientific progress is slow. He paused. There is a component of luck in everything we do. It could be tomorrow, it could be 10 years from now. I'm truly sorry, but there is nothing we can do for your friend right now. A-Train saw Starlight deflate completely as hope vanished from her eyes and sadness crept in. To his surprise, he saw Homelander gently put his arms on her shoulder. Annie, I'm sorry. I understand he means a lot to you and you want to help him, but there is nothing we can do. The only thing you can do is to go and be there for him in his final moments. He said and paused. Come on. I'll take you home for now. He continued and gently nudged the now cooperative heroine into moving by putting his arm around her. As the two captains silently moved past him and Martin, A-Train couldn't help but notice as Starlight seemed to sink deeper into Homelander's embrace. Author note. I know Starlight might seem out of character, however, she is going through a lot of psychological and emotional changes right now. Just because Huey was being an ass doesn't mean she hates him or stopped caring about him. She's still processing those feelings, and she just learned that Huey is dying, as the doctors eventually finished their tests. Coupled that with Huey actually succumbing to the symptoms. Well, it's a lot to process. You may think that V would cure him because A-Train used it to heal his broken leg, but A-Train is a speedster and juicing on V simply put his healing factor power into overdrive. It's the same for Kimiko, where her main power is a Wolverine-like healing factor. Huey is screwed, and so is Butcher. There will be a Butcher/Maeve scene in the next chapter. And no, neither the SI or Martin are stupid enough to mention the experimental Black V. Once again, thank you for reading and reviewing. Y'all have given me some great ideas in the reviews, keep them coming. Chapter 48, Cape to Corporate. Date, October 2022. Even with the increased debt ratios, the projected cash flows are more than enough to cover both interest servicing and the increased OPEX. As I sat in the conference room surrounded by the exec team, I couldn't help but feel excited watching Ashley answer question after question with machine-like precision. Dressed in a light blue power suit jacket and pencil skirt, along with matching bra and panties. Yes, I peeked. Sumi, plump red lips moving without hesitation. I couldn't help but think she looked like a preppy Terminator, but instead of killing she was spitting finance answers. Truthfully, I was getting a stiffy. After years of pressure working for Vought and handling Homelander, there was nothing these finance cucks could throw that would faze her. Ha! Eat your heart out, Edgar. Ashley was a diamond in the making. She was sitting at the head of the table, strategically placed to show that she was in charge of Vought, while I was in my full suit at the middle of the table. Chairman of the board or not, the street had only known me a Homelander, the hero, the savior of New York, leader of the Seven. Officially, I had no business experience, and even though I had much more patience to answer their questions than the old Homelander, it was best that answers came from someone who was at least qualified in their eyes. Even so, the earnings call was going just okay. Both our revenues and profits had dipped for the quarter, which was no surprise to anyone considering the shit show Vought had gone through in the last few months. Of course, it wasn't our quarterly results that caused the uproar, it was the forecast along with all the new initiatives that broke all hell loose. Realistically, projected earnings for 2022 were going to be okay. Lower than expected, but overall okay. It took time for initiatives to ramp up, especially in a big corporation like Vought. Next year was where most of the spending would ramp up, along with the partnership with Byron Satcom for V-Lite, the new satellite telecom venture. Yeah, people freaked out about that, and the grilling intensified. Not only that, but then they realized how much we were planning on borrowing, and saw how much the debt ratios went up. They had a stroke again. It was a bit unorthodox the way we were presenting this. Usually we'd announce new ventures or initiatives come budget time, using press conferences once it was all planned. Crossing the I's and dotting the T's, that sort of thing. This time I instead went for a massive push on the whole management team for the past 2 months to get a semblance of plan out as early as possible. I wanted the street to get used to the new management initiatives, along with the venture into telecom and space, as early as possible. Take the stock slump this year as a shock and ironically let it ride back up in the next year while the actual spending spree is on the way. In a way I was doing this for the stockholders, minimizing the risks and protecting their interests. Of course the most specific stockholder I was worried about was me. A lot of Homelander's wealth was tied up in Vought stock. Between the various royalties and stock portfolios and now my net worth was around $400 million. Now Homelander never really put any care into his finances, and why should he? Everything he ever needed or wanted was provided by Vought. Unlike him, I cared about it quite a bit, and just like Vought I was planning on borrowing a metric ton, against my stock and options, not only to diversify but also to invest in V-Light and the soon-to-be-acknowledged space ventures. I understood very well the power and influence money gave you, especially when you had a large purse to spend on whatever you wanted. I didn't just plan on being the most powerful person physically or figuratively by being at the head of Vought. I was going for personal power in all aspects of my life. There was also the factor that I was riding high on the Savior of New York bit, which gave a lot of public leeway. That made it unlikely that some of our biggest shareholders like the New York State and Local Retirement System, NYLRS, who administers both the Employees Retirement System, ERS, funds and the Police and Fire Retirement System, PFRS, funds would move to remove me from the board for all the changes I was bringing in. For now New York loved me, and I needed to take advantage of that. With Byron providing their satellite technology and Vought administrative and launch capabilities. Ashley confidently droned answers on and on. First the earnings call, then the ensuing media circus, probably for another 2 months. Hopefully it will calm down by the new year. Was all I could think as the meeting continued past the scheduled hour. Chapter 49. Legacy. Date: December 2022. Maeve walked into the surprisingly clean apartment with trepidation and a bit of dread. "So what brings your Royal Highness to visit little old me?" Butcher's gruff voice asked, and Maeve couldn't help but scowl. "Didn't happen to finally get your hands on some V, did you? No, security is still tighter than a drum. You look like shit, not eating again." She eyes his dark circles under his eyes and thinning frame. Christ, he probably lost another stone, she thought. Billy scowled in return and went to the kitchen and pulled out a whiskey bottle from one of the top cabinets and 2 glasses. "The bloody pills keep the seizures away but cut the hunger right out, makes everything taste like stale cardboard," he said and took a sip of the caramel liquid. "Not whiskey, I see," she remarked. "No, not whiskey." He gave her a cocky smirk. "Whether it's the V, the pills or the booze, one way or another I'm slowly wasting away. Might as well make it all 3. He said and handed her the second glass. She took it, put it to her lips and took a small sip. They both stood in silence for a brief moment, enjoying the sensation of the drink. "Have you visited Huey?" His demeanor darkened instantly. "Bit hard to do with the monitor," he said and tapped his ankle. "Like that could stop you," she couldn't help but sarcastically remark. "Well, wouldn't want to make Mallory look bad. She went to bat for me on this one." He took another strong swing of his glass, turning away back to the kitchen counter. She felt a surge of annoyance at him. "You should go. Doctors said it's a miracle he even regained consciousness. They say it could be any day now. Annie's there every day. Even M.M. showed dash." "Yes, I fucking know," he said, slamming his glass down on the counter, shattering it. Maeve watched as Butcher suddenly stopped and took a deep breath. I know. Okay. I will," he said with finality. "Now you're not really here to nag me about my absence from visiting hours. I got enough of that from Frenchie and Kimiko. Nor do I see a magic cure-all vial in your hands, so why are you here?" he asked as he started to clean up the broken glass and spilled contents. The sense of anxiety overtook her again. This was the moment she had dreaded for the last week, but he needed to know. She took a quick breath and steadied herself. "No, you're right. I'm here to tell you that I'm pregnant." He stopped and paused for a moment, then turned to her from the kitchen counter. "Well, congratulations," he said. "Seems to be that 'tis the season," he remarked, and she couldn't help but give him a questioning look. "Kimiko broke the news 2 weeks ago. Haven't seen Frenchie happier." He paused, or more scared than ever. He went and threw the shards in his hand in the trash. "But I am quite curious," he said, turning back to her. "How'd that happen?" Now Maeve felt annoyed and put her hands on her hips in her signature pose. "Do I have to explain the birds and the bees to you? Do you want the Disney version or Animal Planet?" She let her sarcasm show. "Cheeky," he responded back. "But you and Elena, well, 2 flowers don't work that way. Usually you need a stinger in between." "Obviously," she remarked. "Now who's the lucky fellow?" She paused, raised her brows and slightly inclined her head as if you point at him. Maeve saw the exact moment as realization came into his eyes. "I'm the stinger," he said, more as a statement than a question. By process of elimination, I hadn't slept with anyone in months before and no one after. She affirmed. Fuck, was his only response. He tried to hide it, but she could see conflicting emotions struggling for dominance in his eyes. She saw that she didn't know what to say, so she continued. William, she said, bringing his attention back. I'm going to keep it. I hadn't thought I was going to be a mother in a long time, but now that it's happened. She paused. She wasn't sure how to express the feelings she's felt ever since realizing she was pregnant, nor could she properly explain the process of how she came to the decisions. Well, I just feel like it's the right way to go. She paused again. I'm telling you because it's the right thing, because you should know, because because I might kick the bucket any day as well. Because it's unlikely I'll see the birth of my own child. He said and stopped. They both stared at each other in silence for a moment. Right fucking mess this is. He finally said. Does Homelander know? Maeve felt a surge anger and annoyance permeate her being again. Homelander. It always came down to Homelander with Butcher. She was annoyed at Butcher for bringing him into this, and she was annoyed at him for being right to ask the question. How will Homelander react to her carrying Butcher's child? That is if he ever found out it was his. She couldn't get to read him anymore. There were too many changes that happened in both him and Vought, but she didn't feel that Homelander will take any action against her. I don't know. I haven't told him, so I don't think. Good. He said firmly. You don't know what that crazy cunt might do. He might hurt you both out of spite. He might. She acknowledged. But I don't think so. Something's changed in him. Spending time with Ryan changed him, I think. She said hesitantly. She knew there were unresolved issues between Butcher and Ryan, so she quickly continued. Besides, Vought wouldn't waste the marketing opportunity. Butcher scoffed. They'll parade you around like a prized mare, the pregnant icon, superhero mommy. Christ, I can see the billboards now. He said. Probably. She said, her tone resigned. I won't be able to acknowledge that it's yours. The PR would be a disaster. He was silent for a split second. Probably for the best. I'll be surprised if Vought doesn't imply immaculate conception to begin with. Chapter 51. Mission I. Date. February 2023. The ding of the elevator signifying the end of the ascent to the top of the tower brought Starlight's attention out of the report and back to reality. As she entered the cavernous space that once was Homelander's apartment, she could see the signs of construction everywhere. Renovation, not construction, she thought. The actual building construction was done. Homelander had pushed for the building to be repaired as fast as possible, insisting that Vought Tower was a tall, strong and proud shining beacon of power and strength, a symbol of the corporation, the Seven and New York. He sees it as his dick, Maeve had remarked, and she snorted at the thought. Ashley had of course obliged and spared no expense in getting the work crews and pushing through the red tape. Even so, work had gone slow. Vought Tower had been just one of the many buildings that faced damage in the fight for New York, as some like to call it. If only they knew the truth. She briefly thought. After it was all and done, there were 136 casualties and over 300 people injured, all from collapsing floors and falling debris. She'd been furious at Huey and Butcher once the reports came out. It may not have been them directly who killed them, but they were the one that brought that loose cannon soldier boy into play, so she couldn't help but blame them as well. How Butcher managed to weasel his way out of landing in jail was beyond her, but she suspected the not-so-invisible hand of the CIA at play there. As for Huey, well, part of her had been glad that Homelander hadn't exposed him, and part of her was furious with him, and part of her had been really concerned for him. Once he had recovered enough, she spoke her mind on the whole matter, and they fought, apologized and fought again. Admittedly, she said some things she regretted, and he said some things he regretted. The problem was that he hadn't truly recovered before she knew it. He fell into a coma, and all her feelings for him bubbled up to the surface again. The doctors kept telling them it could happen any moment, but Huey defied everyone's expectations and clung on to life. When he waded back into consciousness, she was relieved, even ecstatic, but when she came to see him, when she saw the look in his eyes, it was the end. The time to say goodbye. Ever since then, she buried herself into work. There was always work and more work to be done. In between patrols, winter disasters, photo shoots, guest appearances, talk shows, and working on the new retraining program with A-Train, there was always something to be done. Hell, she'd been practically left in charge of the Seven since Homelander was so busy as chairman and the new space venture. More like the Six, now, she remarked. They still needed to recruit a replacement for Translucent. That's why she was here now, needing to talk with Homelander. She wanted to offer the spot to Silver Kincaid without having to go through the stupid reality TV contest again. As she looked around the cavernous space, she couldn't see him. What he was doing up here this late, she didn't know. Homelander? She asked, raising her voice. Homelander? she asked again, walking through the scaffolding set up in various spots. John? Where are you? She asked louder. Up here. 3rd floor, he finally answered. She went up the stairs and found him concentrated, staring out the sliding door into the terrace. Hey, what are you dash? She didn't finish as his right hand went up with his index finger as if to silence her. I need a few moments, he said. She stared at his back. His hair, while shaved on the sides, was getting longer on top, and slicked back was falling into wispy ends. Even with the suit being modified to hide more of his neck, you could still see the scarred tissue. She watched as his head turned to the right side and stayed there for a split moment. The scars on the side of his head, clearly visible, thought the big eye patch was doing well in covering most of the scarring on the front. He only stayed there for a split moment, then turned to her. Thinking this was her cue, she made to speak, but his hand shot up again to prevent her. As she watched him stare directly at her, feeling self-conscious under his intense one-eyed gaze, she realized he wasn't staring at her but through her. Just as fast the moment came and went, and he turned and focused his gaze back to his left. Okay, got it, he said and turned back to her. Put that tablet down. I need your help. Got what? What's going on? She asked, curiosity now burning inside of her. Pakistani grooming gang I've been keeping an eye on. 80 miles from here in Jersey, Motel 5. They're about to sell a 16-year-old. What? How? She asked, confused. You can see that far? She saw him roll his eyes. Well, yes, I can. It's harder with one eye. Need to concentrate, but yes. Now come on, we don't have much time, he said, extending his hand towards her. Right. She wasn't in costume, but she wasn't going to let that stop her from helping someone. She put the tablet down and took his hand as they talked onto the terrace. Oh fuck, it's cold. She couldn't help but exclaim. Channel your power, build the energy in your stomach, then imagine circulating it around your body. Build it up but don't release it, he said firmly. She did, and she felt the sting of the cold winter air abate. Now come on, he urged for her to step on his feet. Stiffen up and hold on tightly to me, he said as he wrapped his right hand around her, squishing her further into him. Close your eyes or channel energy into them to protect them. We're going to go pretty fast. Ah, she yelped as she barely had time to act on his instructions. He wasn't kidding, they were accelerating at an incredible pace. She felt her clothes pushing onto her, bunching up against the air drag. She brought up more energy as to protect herself from the biting cold wind. She noticed Homelander was flying upside down, supporting her weight with the length of his body for better leverage. Like a rocket, they blasted through the sky at ever-increasing speeds. They were flying low enough that the landscape became a continuous blur. She felt herself being pushed further down into his raised feet, raised acting as a wall for her to push against. She felt his grip tighten on her, and she did the same. Chapter 52, Mission 2. She couldn't tell how long the acceleration took. A minute or two, or maybe 3, as she suddenly felt they were slowing down. Homelander suddenly twirled, and they were right side up. She could see the approaching parking lot of a Motel 5. You take room 15, it's where the girl is, he commanded her firmly as they landed. I'll take 7, and have a word with her would be pimps, he finished as he broke off their embrace. Right, she affirmed as her mind went into hero mode. Wait. John, wait. He turned back to her. Don't, his intense questioning gaze made her hesitate. Don't kill them. They need to face justice, real justice. His gaze lingered on her for a brief second, then snorted as if to hold back a laugh and turned around, cape flapping behind him. Well, it's the best I can get now. With her mind firm, she set out to complete her task. She banged loudly on the door and yelled, "Open up!" A brief look at Homelander, she saw he hadn't even bothered with any pleasantries, and simply smashed his door. Hey Matterchad, I paid for an hour, she heard the man yell from inside. Taking that as all the confirmation she needed, she smashed through the door as well. The sight that greeted her infuriated her. A slightly overweight brown girl with long hair, a nose earring and poorly done makeup was backing up to the corner of the room, doing her best to hide her nakedness, while a skinny, tall, hairy brown man in his underwear was scrambling off the bed. What the bloody fuck, who are you? He started shouting, his English heavily accented. You can't come here. I paid the money, he continued, slipping into his mother tongue. Starlight could only assume they were not nice things. Shut up, she barked at him. You're under arrest, you have the right. She didn't get to finish as the weasel-looking man, now enraged, grabbed his jeans and shoes and rushed her. Fuck you, bloody fuck. Maybe because she wasn't in costume he thought he could overpower her because of her smaller frame, or maybe it was the panic and adrenaline, but he came straight at her. Whether he was trying to escape or to fight her, it didn't matter. It was a stupid move on his part. She was stronger and faster than him by a very wide margin. As he approached, she simply slapped him hard enough that he fell down like a sack of potatoes, fully unconscious. She hoped she hadn't caused any permanent damage. The girl immediately yelled. "Wait, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm Starlight," she said and glowed her eyes. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help," she said and gave the frightened girl a bedsheet to cover herself up. "It's going to be all right. I promise you. It's going to be all right." The girl only nodded and cowered as she wrapped the sheet around her. Starlight ripped a power cord from the lamp and secured the now stirring man. "I see you're done your part. Homelander," both her and the girl exclaimed at the same time. "Right," he said and nodded to the girl. "All is going to be fine. Police are on the way. We are going to get you help," he said to the frightened girl as he went and picked up her clothing, put it in bundle, and handed it to her. Annie couldn't help but ask, "And the other people, are they secure?" he said. "No issues. Now police will be here in a few minutes. Why don't you stay here with Dash?" And here he paused and looked at the girl. Sorry, what's your name, darling?" The girl only looked at him for a moment, then slowly said, "Ina, yes sir." "Thank you," he said and turned back to Annie. "You stay here with Inia and make sure she is comfortable while I go deal with everything else." Starlight looked at him briefly, then at the scarred girl, and agreed. It didn't take long for the police and ambulances to come. They both gave their statements, with her focusing on the state of the girl for both police and EMT workers, while Homelander detailed how he'd been tracking the gang. She was surprised when the two would-be pimps, both in their early 20s, confessed to everything, and more on the spot to the police officers. Whatever Homelander had done or said to them before the authorities arrived had been very effective. They both watched in silence as the police finished and left as well. "Do you think they will follow up on the rest of the gang?" she asked. "They will. Now that we've gotten involved," he said neutrally. "For a while at least." She looked at him to continue. "This motel." He gestured to the building. "The owners are part of the gang. They own a few properties around the state. Human trafficking, drug distribution, and a plethora of other things are facilitated through them." "Then why didn't you mention it, Dash?" "No evidence," he interrupted her. "But I know they are part of it. Here we caught these guys in the act. With plenty of evidence. These are dumb young ones, low on the totem pole. They panicked and even confessed," he said with a sly smile. "The older ones are smarter. If we want anything to stick, we'll need real evidence. I don't want to spook them. They will eventually make mistakes." "I see," she said as she absorbed his words. Just a few months ago he would have killed all of them, she thought. Chapter 53, Mission 3. "I could go find them and snap their necks one by one. If you would prefer that," he suddenly said. "It would definitely be easier." Her eyes went wide and she blurted out, "No." He let the silence sit for a moment, looking at her with his one eye. "No, of course not," he finally said. He sighed and turned around, looking at the clear night sky. "There's a rot in our society," he started saying slowly. "A cancer that is growing, that is touching every one of us. Supes, politicians, workers, citizens, all of us." He continued. "It's clouding our vision and killing our minds. Our culture glorifies gangbangers and thugs. Our food is making us fat and lazy, killing us. Our people are homeless and addicted to drugs. Our politicians pretend to listen and our corporations pretend to care," he said with more fire and frustration in his voice. "We live aimlessly, divided with no vision and direction, no dream to unite us all, to push us forward to achieve what we could be," he said more wistfully. She found herself captivated by his words. "All of us pretend to care. We pretend that change happens with us, the individual, that if we do a good deed a day." She felt his tone turned mocking. "We would change the world for the better. But we all know that is a lie. Change comes from the top, from being forced on people," he said firmly, then turned to her. "The local police will now investigate. Maybe they will even get the feds involved, all because we forced their hand." She nodded in agreement. "If you want to prevent other Inias from happening, then we have to change how things work. Our schools, our police, what we value in our culture. We have to rise to the top and cut the rot from where it starts." She saw him pause and take a deep breath. She didn't dare take his eyes off him. He shook his head slightly, then looked at her again, his features softened. "Come on. Enough of me ranting. I'll take you back to the tower." He once more extended his hand to her. She looked at it for a split second and took it. As their hands clasped, she thought, "Aren't you the most rotten of them all?" Date: February 2023. "Congratulations. Deep was the first one to break the silence. The rest followed with their own remarks, to which she smiled and accepted, though Maeve's eyes were on the only team member that mattered. Homelander. Well, I have to say that is wonderful news, he said, echoing the others. My congratulations, of course. To you and Elena? He asked, leaving the other implied question silent. Yes, she replied. Officially, as far as the public was concerned, she and Elena were still together. Privately was another matter. Anonymous donor. Homelander shrugged his shoulders and gave a big one-eyed smile. Well, someone out there is a very lucky man. Have you told Ashley yet? Starlight asked. No, not yet. Oh, she's going to love it. The marketing department is going to have a field day with this. You're going to become #1 mommy in the world. Super mommy to the rescue. Homelander said excitedly. The implication was clear, there was no way to refuse the spotlight. Vought wouldn't let her, and neither would Homelander. How far along are you? Annie asked with concern, though Maeve knew her well enough that Starlight was disappointed she wasn't told first. 6 months. Oh, that's pretty far along. I thought you'd be bigger. Deep replied carelessly, and A-Train punched him. You're a moron. A-Train said, shaking his head. What? What's wrong with what I said? You're wrong, that's what. A-Train replied. Enough, you two. Homelander butted in to stop their bickering. Maeve, I think I speak for everyone when I say that we are all very happy for you. Everyone nodded in agreement. Do you know what the sex is? Starlight asked. Leave it to the only other woman in the room to ask any of the relevant questions. She thought. Yes, it's a boy. Found out last month. And have you been checked out by our doctors? Homelander asked next. No, I went to Elena's family doctor. We did the tests through their clinic. Well, I insist you get checked out by ours as well. You are a part of the 7, we take care of our own, and it's part of your contract. He paused and looked around the room. Part of all of our contracts. Vought takes the health of our employees and heroes very seriously. Unless Vought is trying to kill them, of course, then screw their health. She thought. But, Homelander continued, I'm sure everything is all right, and it will be a very healthy and strong boy. Now enough with the Inquisition. Let's move on to today's agenda. We need a new member. We've been down to 6 for a while, and now more than ever with Maeve's impending maternity leave. Starlight has a few ideas. He said and nodded at the blonde. Thanks, Homelander. Here's what I was thinking, we have a few options. As the discussion continued, Maeve couldn't shake the feeling that Homelander had put too much emphasis on the word strong. Author note. Here we have some more Homie and Starlight moments. To clear up some confusion, I see form some reviewers. The Vought scientists did not only harvest all the genetic materials, blood, stem cells, eggs, other genetic mumbo-jumbo. They could from Kimiko and Maeve, they also impregnated them with HL's sperm. It was implied in the story that Phase 1 was harvesting and Phase 2 was impregnation. Phase 2, the impregnation, happened because, as Dr. Schultz implied, the stars aligned. And it was the right time to do it, and the eggs received the sperm and all that sciencey jazz. Basically a shot in the dark that worked. Why would Homelander want to impregnate those two? Because the survival rate of fertilized eggs with his sperm were low. Because the survival rate of his children in women normal and super were very low for both mother and child. He knows that from reading the notes on Ryan and all the other women that died trying to carry his kids. He knows all that from being buddy-buddy with Schultz, and he knows that because he's an SI that saw the show. So two strong soups like Maeve and Kimiko are very ideal to carry his offspring. Now neither Kimiko or Maeve know that their kids are actually HLs. They have no reason to suspect it. Kimiko was at Vought for like a day or something, and it's implied in the story by Butcher that her and Frenchie hooked up shortly after she was released. After all, there is nothing like a shared horrifying near-death experience that makes you want to bang. She and everyone else thinks it's Frenchie's kid. While Maeve has no reason to suspect anything since SI Homelander didn't rave to her about how special her eggs and genetics are. As far as she's concerned and as far as everyone else saw was she was injured and unconscious, and Vought took care of her. There's video evidence. No one was restricted access to her, everything is on the up and up. So she thinks it's Butcher's kid since they had drunken spiteful sex together like a day before. Yes, everyone will eventually find out those are HL's kids, and there will be some conflicts that arise from that. No, it won't be obvious right away. Once again, thank you for reading and reviewing. Y'all have given me some great ideas in the reviews, keep them coming. Chapter 54. Super Breath. Date: March 2023. Dad! Ryan yelled, coming down the stairs to the kitchen. Dad! He looked around at the empty kitchen. It was 7 a.m. and his dad would usually be making breakfast by now. He looked around the spacious house bewildered. He wasn't upstairs, ground floor, basement, or the garage. Then it clicked. The backyard, he thought. He quickly rushed out the door and onto their massive deck, from where he saw Homelander floating cross-legged in front of a bunch of stacked barbell weights, looking like he was breathing heavily. Ryan thought. Dad. What are you doing? Homelander actually seemed startled by him as he turned to him. Morning, Ryan. Sorry, I was concentrating so hard I actually didn't realize you were calling. That surprised Ryan, since his dad seemed to always hear him, sometimes from really far away. Even in the city where he had trouble focusing. That's okay, but what are you doing? Were you hurt? He asked with a bit of concern and saw Homelander immediately laugh and smile. No, son, nothing like that. Nothing to worry about, he said with a smile. I was practicing a new superpower, he said with an ever bigger smile. Really? That's so cool. Ryan asked, excited. He liked using his powers. It made him happy and satisfied. He'd practiced really hard over the last few months to get handle on them. He was really proud of it. What is it? He asked and practically leaped to join his dad in the yard. Homelander smirked. I call it super breath. Super breath? Ryan asked, confused. Yeah, super breath. You know how our muscles are super strong and we can lift really heavy weights and move really fast. Ryan nodded. Well, other parts of our bodies are just as strong, fast and durable, and we just need to learn to control them. Like our lungs, diaphragm, abs muscles, and a bunch of others. He said, and Ryan looked confused. Here, check this out. It will be easier if I show you. Homelander pointed towards a stack of 45-pound plates that went up to Ryan's waist. He saw his dad take a much deeper breath than normal, held it for a second, and then leaned forward and blew at the stack. The pressure from the powerful breath was so strong 4 of the plates flew off the top into the air, landing about 20 yards away. Wow! That was amazing. Homelander smiled. Do you think I can do it too? Sure thing. Why don't you give it a shot? Ryan followed the motions his father, but his breath didn't budge any of the plates. Don't worry, son. Homelander said, patting his back. It took me a couple of weeks to get it right. I'm sure you'll get in no time. It's just like everything else, practice. Practice makes perfect. I know, Ryan said, cheering up. But earlier you weren't blowing the plates away and you were still breathing weird, he asked again. Well, what I was doing is that I was trying to breathe in a lot of air. His arms moved up and spread out, and keep it in my lungs condensed. His arms brought coming back together and his hands forming a ball. Effectively breathing out less air than took in. You see, right now I can use super breath only for a few seconds before I run out of air, so I'm hoping to extend that time by keeping more air in my lungs. So like a reserve, like a gas tank? That's exactly right. Cool. Very cool. Homelander said, mimicking his tone. Now come on. Let's go inside and get breakfast started. Are you excited for the zoo today? His dad patted him on the back and motioned for them to go inside. Definitely. Are you going to wear your disguise today? Ryan asked. Kinda have to sport. Otherwise we'll be swamped with fans. You look weird with dark hair and glasses, and your hunch makes you look so small. Well, that's the idea, isn't it? I'm supposed to be disguised. No one will suspect I'm the Homelander. Now come on and you go, he said and opened the door. Dad? If I have super breath, does that mean I can also have super spit? Ryan saw his dad almost trip as he walked in behind him. Homelander looked up at him. I guess though you probably should only use that as a last resort. It's kind of gross. Then I'll use it only on the really bad guys. Ryan said after a few seconds of thinking. He saw his father smile in approval. Author note. Some Ryan and Homelander moments where the SI is trying to his best to become discount Superman. I figure Homelander will never really have Superman's freezing breath, but the super breath itself is quite achievable. It is just expelling the air at high pressure. Also, I'm not sure what Ryan's age is supposed to be in the show, so I'm going with 12 years old at the end of season 3. Chapter 55. Fresh blood. Date: March 2023. Dena watched the two women sitting across her dinner table with trepidation and curiosity. She was soon going to ascend to the top of the superhero community by joining the Seven, the premier team in the world, the best of the best. Everything she had worked for since she was a little girl was almost within her grasp. Fame, money, power, and most of all the ability to do good on a real scale, to really make a difference, to be the symbol that every little girl looked up at. Just as she looked up at Queen Maeve. So when her future teammates and women extraordinaire asked to meet her on a personal level, she was ecstatic, but when they said they wanted to meet at her house in the middle of the night during the middle of the week, she knew something was wrong. Both Maeve and Starlight were dressed casually, looking none more glamorous or standing out more than any other New Yorker. That is, of course, if you ignored Maeve's obvious baby bump. The mommy of tomorrow, the billboards called her. Women can do it all, some of the talk show slogans said. Though she much preferred the men not required posters. As much as she didn't like the gaudy advertising, she had to admit it was working very well. Maeve baby merchandise was flying off the shelves, and there had been an uptick in same-sex couples looking into clinics and adoption options. At least according to the blogs she was reading. Either way, all good things in her opinion, but from the looks of the two right now, she doubted they were at her house in the middle of the night to talk about merchandising deals. So, she started off, "You wanted to meet? I'm guessing from the circumstances this is not about having some girl talk but about me joining team." The two nodded. "Yes, you see," Starlight started, "after talking it over with Maeve, we thought it's best that we prepare you for what it means to join the Seven and show you how the team works." Dena saw Starlight hesitate to continue her thought and looked briefly at Maeve, "and what it means to work with." She paused. "Homelander." She looked at them with even more rising curiosity and some indignation. "Look, if this is some stupid team tradition, Hayes the new girl so she becomes one with the team, I'm not doing whatever you have planned. I already did that stupid reality show and that was corny enough," she said with feeling more annoyed than anything. She wasn't going to let herself be bullied into some stupid tradition that was probably spawned out of the brain of some frat boy corporate schmuck. "I'm a grown-ass woman and I will not dash." "No," Starlight interrupted loudly and animatedly. "It's not that. No hazing, no weird tradition, nothing like that." She paused. "The Seven aren't quite what Vought presents them to be." She started off again slowly. "The team has flaws, many flaws, terrible flaws, like terrible, terrible dash." Dena saw Maeve roll her eyes and lean in, interrupting Starlight. "We're all terrible fucking human beings, with Annie being the only remotely decent one. Homelander is the absolute worst, and I'm probably third, maybe fourth. No, probably third," she said after pausing for a second. Both she and Starlight looked shocked at Maeve's declaration. After processing it, Dena couldn't help but chuckle, which got the attention of the other two. "Come on now. All soups are fucked up," she said with a bit of relief. "The powers, they mess with our brains. I know, I've been in a few," she said, leaning in towards the two women. "And if you're worried about me running my mouth, don't." She paused and looked at them with intent. "Trust me when I say, in my time with the G-Men, I've seen it all and I've done it all. I know how these things work," she said with confidence and leaned back in her seat. "Not like this, you haven't." Maeve was quick to reply. "You can read minds? How does that work?" Dena looked at both of them in silence for a brief moment. "I need to be within 10 feet of the person. I need to look at them and concentrate. It's ideal if we are both stationary and I can only read what the person is thinking about. It comes up as images, flashes of memory. I can only do it about 30 to 40 seconds at a time, and the person will know I'm in their head." She paused for another second. "Sometimes it's painful for the person, sometimes it's not. Don't know why. Good, then read mine. It will be easier to explain that way." "Maeve, are you sure? You're okay with that in your condition?" She said it could be painful. Starlight interjected with concern. "I am." And she looked at Dena. "Do it." Curiosity taking her over, Dena looked at Maeve and concentrated on her. It wasn't long before thoughts, images and memories jumped up to the front of her mind. At first slow and then a torrent as she synchronized better with Maeve's mind. And with each image, with each thought and each memories that she saw, that she understood, and she felt a knot in her chest grow bigger, tighter, while disgust and fear crept into the depths of her mind until she broke off the connection. She shook her head for a moment as if to dispel the memories and looked back at her two teammates. "You?" What could she say about what she saw, about her hero? "How could you?" "How?" she started. Why didn't you say something?" "Someone. Everyone, we have to say something about this," she said, trying to get control of her anxious breathing. "It's not right, it's too much. It's. She was rambling. She didn't know where she was going with her thought until Maeve interrupted her. "No," she said calmly, which brought Dena back. "No," she repeated back as Starlight stayed silent. "Just no? That's all you have to say?" she asked incredulously. Maeve nodded. "You will say nothing about what I've shown you, and you will do nothing." Maeve's tone was steel. "Because nothing was said or shown, so there is nothing to be done. If you do, Annie and I will deny everything. We will not be on your side. If you are lucky, Noir will be sent, and you will die cleanly and efficiently. Dena saw Maeve pause. If you are unlucky, Homelander will pay you a visit, and well, you've seen how that turns out. Then why show me this? Why show me this at all? Did he send you to prepare me, or something? Or do you even want me on the team? She asked with nervousness and exasperation. I don't understand. No. Starlight intervened. Homelander does not know we are here. If he did, then that wouldn't be good for any one of us. Then why the fuck are you here? Why are you showing me this? So I don't join the team? No. We want you on the team. I want you on the team. Starlight affirmed. You're exactly what the team needs, she said and paused. Look, when I joined, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So I wanted to make sure you were able to make an informed decision. She said earnestly. To know that you might be in some fucked up situations, and hopefully to be able to better protect yourself if you are. Protect myself? You're joking, right? How can I protect myself from that madman? She asked angrily. If he says jump, I have to ask how high? If he says kill, I just go and crush a guy's head, or it's my head. Is that the deal? Starlight leaned back and looked a bit offended. Well, it's not exactly like that, she said with some reluctance. At least not in the last few months. Things have changed quite a bit, especially after he took over Vought and his fight with Soldier Boy. Changed how? Dena asked, anger lacing her tone. He's more. And Starlight hesitated again, looking for the right words. He's less psychotically homicidal and more worried about his legacy. Maeve interrupted. They both looked at her, waiting to elaborate, and Maeve rolled her eyes. He thinks the moon is Gaul and he's Caesar, or Alexander the Great. Or something like that. He ranted about it to me one evening. He went on a big tangent about the education system and something about a new American dream. She said, her chest deflating, letting out a big sigh. Either way, Annie is right. Things have changed, we'll see if it's for the better or not. Maeve finished. Look, Dena, we're not here to convince you one way or another. I think you're exactly what the team needs, but you have to understand what you're singing up for. Starlight said. Dena looked at the two women and exhaled. You'll have my answer by tomorrow. Chapter 56. Interlude *. Date: March 2023. Through hungry eyes I watched the synchronized bounce of the perky, soft and creamy round mounds decorating Victoria's chest. My hands grabbed her ass and my fingers dug deep into her fleshy buttocks, bringing her closer as my mouth dove into the cream. Oh fuck! She yelped as I slurped up her nipples with my tongue. Her fingers pushed deep into my back, nails desperately trying to break through with no avail as my strength took over, forcing her wet slippery tightness up and down on my rock-hard member at a higher rhythm than she expected. Oh fuck. Oh. Fuck. Oh. Oh. Her voice higher pitched now as the pounding increased with each slap, the sound of flesh hitting flesh. As I finish suckling the last of the cream, I grab her tight and hold her in place against my torso, my member deep inside of her. I feel her quiver and tremble against me as she catches her breath. I stand us up on the bed and her legs wrap around me as if afraid I'll slip out. Her weight means nothing to me. Our eyes meet and I start back the rhythmic thrusting. Her plump lips dive into mine and I share the last bit sweetness as we dance with our tongues. Her scent intoxicates me with unrelenting fire. My mouth moves to lick and suckle on her slender neck. N-O-F, she says between panting breaths. Hick keys. Her resistance only serves to excite me, get me harder, and I pound harder than before. Slap, 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 until the fleshy noise blends into one continuous stream. Ash! She squeals and I feel all her muscles shudder and contract against me. Her excitement and ecstasy is infectious and I feel myself reaching the peak as well. With one smooth motion I unbuckle and let her drop on the bed and I shower her quivering form with my hot seed. It takes a brief moment for me to regain control of myself and I float off to grab the box of tissue off the nightstand and offer it to her. She needs another moment to catch her breath, then she accepts my offer. You didn't get any on my hair, did you? She asks and starts the cleaning process. Do you have wet wipes? No, I didn't. I respond. You can take a shower if you want. Washroom's all done. Everything up here's all done. Only first floor needs some touch-ups. She shakes her head. I can't. No time. I have a strategy meeting in an hour. Some DNC bigwigs are going to be joining my team. I nod and give her the wet wipes box I fished from the bottom drawer in my nightstand. When are they going to announce your nomination? I ask. In a week, after the funeral. sensitivities, and all that. She confirms, her hands diligently covering all the sweet and sticky spots. I snort. At least there is still a pretense of manners in our politicians. I put on dark slacks and went downstairs to the kitchen to grab us some water and wait for her to be done. I use my X-ray vision and peek. I admit freely I felt great enjoyment watching her shimmy back into her clothes. Maybe it's just the satisfaction of a job well done, or just the jiggliness of the flesh brought joy to me. It takes her a few minutes and a washroom break before she makes her way downstairs all proper and prim. Her scent being the only clue of our midday activity. I hand the cup of water and she downs half of it. She puts the cup down and looks up. Our eyes meet, golden brown and sky blue. We hold the silent connection for a whole moment, and then she speaks. You know we won't be able to meet up like this? I know. I confirm. The scrutiny will be too intense. She nods. Even today, I really shouldn't have come. You had official business. I say, and she really did, though not really necessary for the director of the FBSA to come in person, but close enough. Silver Kincaid joining the team, Starlight's training program, new hero standards with FBSA buy-in and all that. Which my successor will actually see implemented. She responded with, "Humph. Nonetheless, you'll still get the credit for it." I say with a smirk. I know. She says as a gentle smile touches her lips. All business from now on. She says after a second. All business. I confirm and we move to the elevator. We hold the silence as the doors open with a ding. She enters, presses the button and turns to me. Our eyes meet again, but neither of yous say anything. 1, 2, 3 time passes slowly, an eternity. Our eyes don't dare to break from their embrace, and as the doors finally close I hear a faint whisper. Goodbye, John. I stare unblinking at the closed doors with their cold metallic sheen and whisper. Goodbye, Victoria. Chapter 57. To Infinity and Beyond. Cameron, welcome to 7 on 7 this morning for a special edition of our show. Today officially marks a new era in mankind's space exploration as our beloved superhero Homelander officially enters the race by performing the official test flight of the V-Light's V1 capsule. Now I'm not expert in any matters related to space, so joining me today to remark on this tremendous moment is retired astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot and musician Chris Hadfield. Welcome to the show, Christ. Chris. Thank you, Cameron. Glad to be here. Cameron, now Chris, you have been given access to the V1 capsule and behind the scenes at V-Light. What can you tell us about it? Chris. Well, Cameron, it is essentially a capsule that is 9 meters in diameter and 18 meters in height. It has a volume of approximate 1,000 cubic meters of cargo space, and it weighs about 4 metric tons. Cameron, and how much weight can this capsule hold? Chris, that is an interesting question. The payload of the capsule, that is the term we use for the cargo carrying capacity of space rockets, is technically up to 100 tons. Now of course I'm not sure if the term really applies here since Homelander is replacing the role of the rocket. So maybe it's better to refer to it as the weight that the capsule can support in case of emergency descent. Cameron, emergency descent, what do you mean by that? Can you elaborate? Chris, since Homelander is doing the lifting, it all depends on how much weight he can fly into orbit. In test flights I've seen him move up to 30 tons quite easily. So our instinct is to say that payload is 30 tons. However, the capsule itself can always be reinforced to hold more weight as long as Homelander can fly it up and the special harness that attaches Homelander to the capsule holds. But what if the harness snaps, or there is some sort of unknown accident and he loses control of it and drops it? So the engineers ask themselves, what is the highest weight that they can safely use parachutes on for an emergency descent? The current design and materials allow for a safe descent for up to 100 tons. So even if Homelander could lift 200 tons, they would never load the capsule to that weight with the current harness and emergency descent system. Cameron, wow, thank you for making that distinction for myself and our viewers at home. And today's test flight, there is no cargo in the capsule, is that right? Chris, that is correct. This flight will be all about getting capsule into low Earth orbit about 510 kilometers altitude, testing the various systems and the launch mechanism for the satellites as well, of course, the descent and emergency systems. Cameron, and Chris, with Homelander doing heavy lifting, there has been talk in the media that Homelander will be distorting the spaceflight market and that it will be unfair competition. What can you tell us about that? Chris, in a way they are right, but they are also wrong. You see, problem with putting things into space is the exorbitant cost to lift things up there. With Homelander there is no cost, so from a purely business point of view I can see what they mean. However, from the point of view of mankind as a whole, this is exactly what we need to kick things into high gear. With Homelander's help we can expand the space station, maybe even start a colony on the moon. He can lift things piecemeal, and we can assemble them in orbit. We can bring machines to the moon and start manufacturing spacecraft there. The possibilities are endless. Cameron, a moon colony. Wow, just wow. This is really the next great step, isn't it? Chris, it sure is, Cameron. I hope I can see it in my lifetime. Cameron, now I want to bring it back to the money side of things again, since we've gotten a lot of questions about it ever since VOD announced V-Light, and even in our Congress there has been contention from both sides of the aisle about fair competition and getting the approvals and... Chris, Cameron, I'm Canadian, so I don't think it's fair for me to discuss the politics involved, nor am I an economics expert. What I can tell you though is that up to a decade ago, almost all manned space flights were government funded, and any commercial flights were usually unmanned and cargo carrying only. Essentially launching satellites in space. Cameron. Okay. Chris. And even the companies launching satellites did it only because they thought they could get a great return from it, so we are talking about big corporations here. As both launch technology and telecommunications technology improved, we started to see more smaller secondary players enter the market. Cameron, you mean companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin? Chris. Exactly. They brought new ideas and new ways of doing things. And these companies are slowly moving into manned spaceflights for commercial purposes. And they are doing this because they see a market for it, a way to make money. And the more infrastructure we can get into space, the easier it becomes to be there. More people will be interested into going there. That will spur more investment for companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin. That means more technological advancements making things cheaper, which in turn will create even more interest, so on and so forth. Cameron, so it's the rising tide that will lift all boats. Well, in this case, rockets. Chris. Haha, well put. Even more so, companies should not be worried about competing with Homelander, they should be looking at the opportunities Homelander will provide. If anything, they should be worried that Homelander will not able to do as much as we want him to. Cameron. Oh, what do you mean by that, Chris? Chris. Well, superpowers or not, he is still just one man, and there are only 24 hours in a day. He's chairman of VOT, leader of the Seven, the world's greatest superhero. He's flying around helping people left, right, and center. He's doing talk shows, movies, promoting science education, and so many other things. We are honestly lucky that he has the time to start this venture. I cannot stress enough how much this is going to help humanity if we can just create even the basic orbital infrastructure. Cameron, you know, Chris, I never even thought of it that way. Being in New York and working for VOT, I think that sometimes I just take Homelander for granted. He's really the gift that keeps on giving. Chris, I've just received word from our producers that V-Light was just given the go-ahead and they will launch in 5 minutes. So we are going to switch to the live view for Homelander's takeoff. I hope you can walk us through the different stages of the flight. But before that, a quick break. Chapter 58. My Dear Diary. Date: May 2023. Homelander's Journal. May 13, 2023. I thought it fitting that I start my journal on the day that my greatest enemy, so far, is buried dead into the ground. William Butcher is no more. Finally. I watched him over the months deteriorate more and more, becoming only a husk of his former self. I thought for sure he would drop dead or at least go into a coma over a month ago, but it seems out of sheer stubbornness he refused to let go. I can only assume he wanted to see the birth of his child. I get much more joy at that thought than I should be. Truthfully, I had nothing against the man, it was only because of our intertwined pasts that meant him and I could never reconcile. Besides, superpowers or not, I simply couldn't have a resourceful, hateful cunt like him alive to keep gunning for me. I was only ever so lucky that he went against his principles and became what he hated the most. It killed him and removed that annoyance of a substitute little brother off the board, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. I was worried he would release the video as a last fuck you, but it seems he didn't, and I don't think he will. I don't know if Frenchie, M.M. or Mallory have it. My best guess, he entrusted everything to Maeve to have as a last effort deterrent against me. She's probably the one that convinced him not to do it. I doubt she'd want to raise her son in a post-apocalyptic world. Not that I would ever let it get to that point. It's amazing what you can do with deep fakes nowadays. There's a whole website where people make deep fakes of celebrities fucking. Some are so good I wonder if they aren't actually real sex tapes. No, nothing to worry on that front. I'm prepared if that video ever surfaces. Maeve is due soon, and so should Kimiko. The VOT doctors say everything is normal with Maeve's pregnancy. No signs of powers or abnormalities yet, but I know better and I think Maeve feels it too. Literally, I've seen that boy's kick. Still, it remains to be seen how he will develop. Even my gifts only fully surfaced after a few years. Ryan's were even longer, but that may be because of the sterilized environment he was raised in. As for Kimiko, I have no idea how her pregnancy is progressing. Her and Frenchie had basically disappeared doing God knows what nonsense, only appearing for Butcher's funeral. All I got from observing her was that the baby was also a boy, already sporting a flush of dark hair in contrast to Maeve's kid sporting red. It seems the trend is for all the boys to take after their mothers. Typical. Though as Ryan is maturing every day, I see more and more of his grandfather in him. Soldier boy. One day I have to take a trip to the moon and tie up that loose end. As soon as I figure out what to do with him. I very much doubt that he's fully dead. I can't simply assume that not when I feel no adverse effects when in space outside my need to breath. Which I'm slowly working on. I still need a suite to be in space, but because of my innate hardiness my spacesuit is maximized for optimal mobility and breathing time. It's quite sleek and unlike those bulky tanks that regular humans have to wear. The V-Light launch was successful, and in a few months we will launch our first cadre of satellites. Byron Sat is ramping up production and software programming. Things are going to start moving very fast soon. I need V-Light to be a success within 2 years. With it as a success story, and hopefully Singer and Victoria in office, I'll be able to rope in the government. Then things will really pick up, first orbit, then the moon. Still Soldier Boy, Soldier Boy, Soldier Boy. What am I to do with you? Maybe I can chuck him into the sun. Chapter 59. Take off 3, 2, 1. Date: June 2023. The Earth, a shining blue pearl in a sea of darkness. A breathtaking image I don't think I will ever be tired of seeing. The ocean's blue feeding this otherwise unassuming rock with life-giving water. The continents with their vast grassy plains transforming into protruding mountains where frozen snow colored the tops white. The green forests dotting the lands evoking a fresh feel. The rivers that snake through in every direction, and even the light-up gray concrete spots where mankind gathered all moved, shifted and connected gently, forming a cacophony of lights and colors to my eye, as if part of a greater magical whole. There was a sense of admiration and amazement of this living, breathing planet of ours, coupled with a sense of sadness and dread, when thinking that the whole human race and sapient life in our known universe was here and only here. And it was all mine. All mine for the taking. All mine to shape, mold and change in my image. I was burdened with glorious purpose to lead mankind, conquer the star themselves and usher in a new golden age. But first I needed to make sure V-Light was a success, which is why I was floating more than 600 kilometers over the Earth in low orbit. Homelander, you've reached correct orbit parameters. Capsule is ready to deploy cargo. Spoke the radio in my helmet. I quickly double-checked the display in my helmet to make sure it was all right. Roger that, maintaining orbit. I answered back. Undergoing pre-deployment checks. Ground control answered. And, all clear. Cargo ready to deploy in 3, 2, 1. I watched in silence as the satellites deployed one by one, unfurling their panels and jettisoning into correct orbital positions. 60 Byron 3, often referred to as B3, satellites were being deployed in this first launch. The B3 satellite model was not the most up-to-date technology available, being already half a decade old. However, most of the operational kinks had been worked out, and it had become the workhorse telecommunication satellite of Byron Satcom. Additionally, the materials, parts and chips to manufacture the satellites were more readily available on the market than newer, more competitive models. In summary, it was a tried and true tested technology that we were able to manufacture easily enough. If all goes well, then in a month we will be able to double production capacity, and then double it again in the next month. By the end of the year we'll have an array of over 1,300 satellites, and triple that by the end of the second year. If things go really well, then in a year we'll be able to launch the first proprietary V-Light satellite, which is really just going to be an upgraded version of the Byron 6 satellite. Once the engineering teams realized they don't need to worry about weight anymore, they kind of went, well, crazy. The requirements were still being finalized, so I wasn't putting too much hope in it. I knew the more capabilities were integrated, the more complex the design had to be, and the more time it took to troubleshoot everything. So for now, the B3 will have to do. Deployment complete. Homelander, confirm visual. I know the cameras transmitting to ground control already confirmed visual, but since this is the first mission, I use my supervision to check the capsule and scan the satellites as they all were moving into orbital positions. Confirmed. I can't see anything wrong with the cargo. Glad to hear that. All our instruments confirm cargo is in working condition. You are clear for descent. Roger that. Beginning descent. I confirm and begin my practice descent at a leisurely 500 clicks an hour. I was rushing V-Light internet to market not only to beat the competition, but also because I needed to look successful. When you are operating at my level, appearances were everything, and I needed to be seen as more than just the celebrity Boy Scout hero, the strongest man in the world, the #1 hero, the savior of New York. I wanted to build a different kind of trust with America. I wanted them to see me as someone that can lead, that can enact change, that can get things done. I wanted to create a different kind of mythos around me, one of intelligence, capability, and business sense. I would soon come to lean on that trust and reputation probably more than anything else. I was going to ask a lot of America in the next 2 decades, specifically a lot of money and power. You don't start a whole new space race with just the wallet and influence of one company. No, no, no. You need massive government support, the backing of a whole nation. Billions and billions will be needed for R&D alone to have better everything for colonizing space. Of course, the fact that all of this new spending will make me one of the richest men in the solar systems is only an added benefit. All of that was in the long term. In the short term, it also looked incredibly good for the street. Even though we were on the road to recovery after the stock took a nosedive from the initial announcement last year, forecasted spending was increasing, and we would have a pretty turbulent second half of the year. New training and retraining for the heroes, wage increases all across the board, better benefits and health insurance, more training for managers and frontline staff. The ever-expanding R&D did not come cheap. Hell, our new maternity policy was going to cost tens of millions. Vought was now the leader in maternity benefits in the country. Amazing for employees, fantastic for my and Vought's reputation, but terrible for keeping costs down. Keeping the stock price up was integral not only to ensure I kept my position as chairman of the board, but also because a large part of my wealth was tied to Vought's stock, and most of my space investments won't really pay off for another 5 years assuming everything goes well. Which it never does. But nevertheless, I was willing to risk all the extra spending at the worst-case scenario. I would have bought the hearts, minds and loyalties of at least 200,000 Americans. Besides, I always figured that LexCorp must have had kick-ass benefits too. Otherwise, why would people continue to work there? Chapter 60, Nubian Prince. Date: June 2023. He took a slow breath to calm himself and another look at his target. With the path clear and no interference in sight, he moved. With confident steps, he put up an air of control even though excitement filled his chest. As he closed in, seeing his target unaware, he cleared his throat. "Excuse me, sir," he said with relief that his voice didn't crack. His target turned around, plate full and shrimp in hand. "You're Nubian Prince, right? I mean, of course you are." He started stuttering, emotions getting the better of him for asking such an obvious question. "I just wanted to say how much of an inspiration you are. I've been following your work since you started in Detroit. You're the reason I wanted to become a hero in the first place." He stopped as he noticed his hero look at him not and swallowed his food. Nubian Prince put his plate down and wiped his hands with a napkin. "Nice to meet you, kid. What's your name?" Instantly he felt relief as he took the taller dark-skinned man's hand in his own and shook it. "Darren Dolohov, sir." He saw Nubian Prince raise his eyebrow at him. I mean Sidestrike, sir." Nubian Prince smiled at him. "Nice to meet you, Darren. Just remember, when in costume, it's always your hero name. It's company policy," he said gently. "Yes, sir. Nubian Prince, sir? Just call me Gerald while we are here. And enough with the sir stuff. We're both heroes here. Plus you are making me feel like my father." Yeah, of course, sure thing, Gerald," Sidestrike said. "You're pretty new, right, kid? How many years in the business?" Gerald asked. "Just started last year. Well, I mean, I taught the academy and graduated last year." "And how are you finding it so far?" He hesitated to answer, but felt he should say the truth to the person he admired the most. Honestly, it is not what I expected." He hesitated. "In what way?" Nubian Prince asked in earnest interest. "Well," he started. "Once I graduated, I thought I'd be out there in the field doing good, catching bad guys and helping people. But it's been a lot less field work than I thought, and a lot more media focus, I guess." He paused briefly, like they are having me do a lot of TikTok videos every time I go out. They say it's for community outreach, but I think it's mostly because I gained a big following during my academy days. He saw Nubian Prince smile and chuckle. "It's just part of the job, Darren. Trust me, you'll get your time in the field, you'll get your hands dirty, and if you stick long enough you'll get to see stuff you wish you hadn't seen. Every hero here has a few cases they wish they hadn't seen, gruesome stuff." He saw Gerald tone turn somber as if remembering memories he wish he didn't have. "You'll get to help people personally, and that's important, don't get me wrong, but the media stuff, the movies, the commercials, the sponsorships, the TikToks, that important as well." Darren listened intently. "That's how the company makes money, and that's how we make money. And make no mistake, money is how you change the world. You see, I've been in this business for a decade and a half. Saved a lot of people and lost quite a few. You never get to save everyone, you have to remember that, kid." Gerald said as a matter of fact. But you know what I'm most proud of? Darren didn't answer the rhetorical question. It's the Maya Center for Excellence. Darren looked confused for a moment, trying to figure out where he heard that name before. It's the private school academies I've founded. Nubian Prince supplied helpfully. 5 schools, about 300 to 400 students, each half the seats go to low-income inner-city kids. Every year over 200 students graduate and go to college on scholarships that would have never had the opportunity otherwise. Almost all the kids graduate college and make 6 figures within 5 years. He continued proudly. We have a 60% year-over-year alumni donation rate. People giving back to help other students. We've created a community that improves people's lives more, and none of it could have been possible without my money, fame, and influence as Nubian Prince. He finished off with a satisfied smile. Darren took a moment to absorb his words. I see. I never really thought of it that way. He finally said, feeling a bit ashamed. Don't worry, kid, you're young. You're just starting out. Just remember, if you want to change the game, you first have to play it. Take for example. He said and looked around the room until he found his target. Starlight. He pointed Darren at the captain of the 7, talking with a group and eating snacks. How many people do you think she saved in the past few months? Maybe a dozen, maybe 2, maybe less. But how many people do you think the Homelight Foundation helped? Hundreds. He said and looked back at Darren. So you have to decide for yourself how you want to help the world. You can do the time and take the money to make a difference, or you can buy fancy cars and bling for yourself. Nubian Prince paused and looked at him intensely, then turned back to the table and picked up his plate. It's all up to you, Darren. I understand. I have a lot to think about. No worries, kid. Now come on, lunch is almost done, make sure you eat up. He said, loading up his place with shrimp. We're spending the rest of the afternoon on de-escalation techniques. We'll be running through quite a few scenarios. Make sure you pay attention and do your best. Had a chat with the big man himself, he's making it a sticking point to reduce the number of lawsuits. Yeah, sure thing. Darren said and started to load a plate of fried rice and lemon chicken for himself. As he was putting the much-needed sustenance, a thought just struck him. He'd been so into the conversation that he didn't really notice until now. He felt compelled to ask. Gerald, I hope it's not rude of me to ask, but dash. He didn't get to finish as Nubian Prince answered. I was born in Detroit. Parents from Sudan, so I know the accent. I put it on for the cameras. He said with a small smirk. It's all part of the show, kid. He finished with a wink and left to talk to another group of heroes. Chapter 61. Who is my mother? Date: June 2023. With Maeve's son and my son being born, I had an overwhelming urge to find out who my mother was. I suspected from all the fan theories who it was, but it was still good to verify. While there is a certain level of disgust I feel if Stormfront is my mother, I don't really care since she wasn't my mother. It would of course be some sort of fucked up poetic trope as the ancient gods themselves that married and fucked their own siblings, since Homelander kind of viewed himself as a god among men. Nonetheless, I wanted to verify. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any records of Dear Mommy, digital or otherwise. That left me with only one avenue, which was why I was now entering Martin's office. Martin, I said loudly, startling the man. He was focused on his computer, likely going over the latest reports on 24V and probably a dozen other things. The man was gobbling up the increased R&D budget at an unfathomable pace. John, how are you this morning? Doing well, thank you. I have one question for you, I said, getting to the point and piquing the man's interest. Who is my mother? I saw him blink, absorbing my question, then his features softened into sadness and he deflated into his chair. His heart spiked and a small release of sweat happened as his temperature grew a bit too suddenly. Martin? I pressed. He took a breath and looked at me. Are you sure you want to know? You won't like it. Bingo. And also, fuck, I said loudly. I was only partially faking my outrage. I knew it. Of course it's her. Who else could it be? That fucking Nazi bitch. How could she? Oh God, the things we did. An adequate show had to be put on. The new Homelander had to show at least some level of disgust and remorse. Martin looked at me confused. It's fucking Stormfront, isn't it? Martin blinked. What? My mother is Stormfront, right? What? No, he looked even more confused. Why would you think that? Now I was confused. You take her flight and energy manipulation, I said, raising my right hand. You add Soldier Boy's ridiculous super strength and invulnerability, I said, raising my left hand. You add them together. I bring both hands together in clap. And you get me. I could see Martin thinking things over for a second. Yes, I can see how that would make sense, but no, it's not her. He said firmly. Then who could it possibly be? Tell me. It might be better if you leave this secret buried. It will only make things worse. Oh, now I was deadly curious. I came in here prepared to hear it was Stormfront or some random crack whore or something like that, but he was making sound like it was worse. Martin, I said as I slowly approached his desk. Tell me. Now. I saw him swallow, and then he opened his mouth. Well, your surrogate mother was a woman named Maria Avero. She's the one that carried you to term. She died in the birth. But she is not my mother? So they used someone else's egg with Soldier Boy's seed. Yes, he said, and I waited for him to elaborate. It's Catherine. Then he hesitated. Vogelbaum. My world tilted. My chest felt constricted by a knotted chain. The world muted as my brain processed the name. Catherine Vogelbaum. A sudden flurry of emotions all acted at once, and a surge of energy exploded from the pit of my stomach. That fucking Nazi son of bitch. How could he? How fucking could he? A rage like I never felt before engulfed me. I briefly felt something get squished as my hands scrunched into fists, shaking, trembling with rage. I'll kill him. How could he do this to me? I'll dig up his corpse and piss on him. My vision turned red. How could he do this to me? That sick fucking German Nazi piece of shit. I was breathing heavily now. I felt like I could not get enough air. HN. I barely heard a whisper. Everything was red. I felt heat and energy build inside of me, and the faint whisper again. OHN. Why everything red? I need to calm down. I take a breath and exhale slowly. John. I hear loudly as I regain my sense. I look in front of me. Martin isn't there. His desk I crushed before me. In my hands I hold smushed pieces of it. The wood turned into compressed smush from the pressure. John, please, you have to calm down or you'll blow us all up. I turned to see a frightened Martin by the door. I realized I was glowing an eerie red aura. A few seconds more and I would have blown up like Soldier Boy. I take another breath to reel in the energy back into myself. I won't blow us all up, Martin. Now tell me what happened. He came back into the office after dispatching the other curious co-workers that came to see what the commotion was all about. Catherine and her husband had trouble conceiving. Jonah performed the in vitro procedure for them. It was during this process that he harvested her eggs. I don't know why he used her. But I can tell you she never knew about you, and Jonah never wanted her to find out. He paused, but he looked like he wanted to continue, so I let him. He erased all records around the time you were 7 years old. He swore all of us to secrecy, threatened us. 7 years old. That was around the time Homelander started killing his caretakers, masking them as accidents, just to see if he could get Jonah's attention. His affection. John, I'm sorry. I said it would have been best if we leave this buried. The man said, and I know he felt sad but also pity for me. I'm sorry, Martin. I need to go. I said after a moment of silence. It was hard to process, and I really did need to go. Homelander's emotions were strong. I was me, but I was also him with all the memories and feelings he's ever had. All the fame and adoration. All the insecurities and needs. All the pain and damage Vought put him through growing up. It was no wonder Vogelbaum had been Vaught's successor. All the physical but mostly the emotional pain damage Jonah inflicted on his own blood, on his own kin, with no remorse, only aiming for results. But worst of all, the fucking piece of shit had withheld from Homelander the one thing he earned. To have real connections. A real family. Catherine Vogelbaum was Jonah's younger sister. And I was Jonah's nephew, flesh and blood. But in his eyes all I had ever been was a product. Chapter 62. Firestorm. Ashley. Date. July 2023. Cameron saw the conference room doors burst open as Ashley walked in like a fiery hurricane. The mini-me trailing behind her, struggling to juggle an assortment of phones, laptop, coffee mug, and paper files. A deadly combination in his opinion. One small step and it all comes crashing down. Is he there yet? The Vought CEO asked the room at large. He could feel the exasperation in her tone. Not yet. I mean, he hasn't called back, nor have we seen him on TV. Shauna, their head of legal, answered promptly. Christ. What the fuck was he thinking? None answered. They all knew the question was rhetorical. What about Starlight and A-Train? They are on site helping with the town evacuation. Sharon, the chief emergency disaster coordinator, pitched in. Shockwave, Racer and Blink should be there pretty soon, 15 maybe 20 minutes tops if they aren't there already, but Inferno and Bright Flame are about an hour away while Torture, Fireworks and Sparks are all around 2 to 3 hours away. Great, some 2-bitrate speedsters and a bunch of C-listers that can barely hold a candle lit. Those idiots are more likely to burn downtown themselves. Cameron saw her sigh. At least Inferno and Bright Flame are competent. If the town actually catches fire. Otherwise they'll all be left standing there looking like schmucks holding their dicks in their hand. She said with annoyed exasperation as her eyes stared intently on the images on TV showing the raging inferno that was the California massive forest fire, then turned to the table at large. Cameron saw everyone in the room give a concerned look. What? Ashley asked, annoyed, and rolled her eyes. It's not like I want the town to actually catch fire. It will still be great PR. Taylor, the head of marketing, added in. Brave heroes help evacuate the town. Vought acts fast. Sends their fastest team. She said with a tone of excitement. We can spin this 1,001 ways. Ashley looked at her unconvinced as she took her seat at the head of the giant conference table. It's also very, very likely the town will catch fire. Sharon interjected before Ashley could respond. Our analytics show that at the rate the fire is spreading, and due to wind conditions, it will likely be within the next 2 hours. It's probably why they ordered the evacuation. 2 hours? Minnie, Ashley asked with her hands now free from the impending disastrous clutter. There's like over 60,000 people in that town. Is that going to be enough time to get everyone out? Cameron felt the room go quiet once more. Unlikely, but they don't need to get everyone out at the same time. They likely started with the neighborhoods closest to the forest and worked their way backwards from there. That will likely give them enough time and keeping the streets clear. Sharon added reluctantly. Rhonda, their head of legal, almost snorted as her eyes were still on her phone. Like that ever works. CNN's been reporting massive traffic jams on all ways out of the area. She said and brought her phone to show the report to the table. Ashley sighed deeply. Great, this is likely going to be a disaster. She paused as everyone looked at her. For both us and the town, obviously. Homelander's rushing in half-cocked with God knows what plan. We can only hope he plays it safe for the cameras. Ashley said, and he felt the chord of annoyance in her tone reverberating strongly. Cameron thought it understandable. While natural disasters were their bread and butter, they required planning and coordination both for operational effectiveness, picking which soups to go where and coordinating with the local authorities, and also for getting the maximum media and PR boost. Cameron saw Sharon respond. While Homelander hasn't coordinated with us as it would be standard procedure in these cases, we can speculate from the heroes he's mobilized that he likely means to act as emergency evacuators. He and the speedsters could rush anyone critical to a hospital, while the pyrokinesis soups can contain the fires as they spread around the town. She said comfortably. It's really the only logical thing they can do. It's not like he can fight the forest fire itself. She said, shrugging her shoulders. And my team is already working on various scenarios and are prepping material as we speak. Taylor said confidently. Well, that's good. Ashley said, resigned as her gaze moved her eyes back to the giant TV on the far side wall. A few moments passed as they watched in a connected silence the aerial view of the ever-expanding fire. As they watched the smoke dance on the screen, Cameron felt a genuine solemn moment with his fellow co-workers. A permeating pain when faced with the truth that nature still ruled their world, that even with all their power and accomplishments it could all literally go up in smoke. A connectedness of the human experience. Ashley broke this feeling. Cameron, why the FUCK are we watching this on MSNBC? Alright. So our helicopter is undergoing maintenance and we weren't able to secure a replacement, and our ground team should be just about setting up. We're scheduled to go live in 15 with Terry and Laura. Cameron replied with confidence. The answer seemed to mollify Ashley, but Cameron couldn't help but wonder if she's just holding back her bite for their next stress relief session. Their little on and off again relationship had slowed down as they both had been swamped with work, but while the sessions had become rarer, they had become that much more intense. One small problem. He continued as Ashley and the rest of the room turned back towards him. They are blocking access to most of the town outside of emergency vehicles for safety reasons, so our team might be stuck on the outskirts. But so would everyone else's, right? Asked Shauna. His features scrunched in response. Not exactly, if they were already there before they blocked access, and they can stay until the sector is evacuated. And let me guess, that's where our heroes are? Rhonda asked. He answered as both him and Sharon nodded at the same time. Yes, for the most part. They all watched Ashley sigh. So I guess it is CNN and MSNBC all the way? Cameron couldn't help but reluctantly nod. Chapter 63. Firestorm, Starlight. Starlight watched the screens in the command tent as they showed a steady stream of cars moving slowly but surely, all heading out of the city like a viscous, sluggish stream of blood. There wasn't much they could do. Well, there wasn't much she could do. A-Train and the other speedsters Shockwave, Racer and Blink could all technically run people to the nearest hospital over 50 miles away. Technically, because practically if anyone was in that dire danger they likely wouldn't survive the trip. Still, nonetheless, in a pinch they could help even if it was a risk, while her power set didn't really help much outside of going into an actual burning building to pull someone out. So with a lack of ability to help outside of lending her face and fame to make a few announcements, there really wasn't much for her to do other than watch the screens and try not to be in anyone's way. She sensed that the fire chief wasn't too thrilled with them being here, and was making it obvious he was doing this as a favor to the governor. Annie thought likely that Vought had helped in his election campaign, but then again she knew Vought donated to both sides of the aisle. Her gaze turned to A-Train talking with the other speedsters. Shockwave was A-Train's main rival, as the mid-20s man had been considered as his replacement on the 7. Racer was an older gentleman in his 60s from the Midwest. She remembers hearing about him maybe 15 or 20 years ago when she was a child herself. Blink was new. He didn't look older than 15, and she didn't remember him from Vought's rosters. Rosters she had recently gotten to know quite intimately, as she and A-Train had been in charge of the whole retraining project. A mammoth task had just recently been completed. Starlight took in Blink's appearance and judged by the costume, or more like lack of costume, since it was nothing more than blue and green spandex shorts and shirt, usually worn by cyclists, topped off with sleek goggles, that were currently hanging off his neck revealing his brown eyes, that he wasn't one of Vought's or any of the other lower agencies. This made her think it was just some boy with powers that decided to play hero, his excitement evident as he was talking with the older speedsters. But it also made her question what the hell was Homelander thinking calling him, and how the hell did he even know about the kid? She and A-Train had been shooting a commercial in LA when the call from Homelander came asking them to meet here. Of course she had been surprised, since responses to these types of natural disasters would usually be pre-planned and involve the Emergency Disaster Coordination Team, both for Vought to deploy its resources effectively and to stay on top of the PR game. Where they went, so did the cameras. This of course had been rushed, and with no cameras in sight, no coordination of where to go from head office, and a fire chief that wanted nothing more than to throw them out, they were stuck holding the bag, so to speak, waiting for Homelander to come with his grand plan. She hoped he wouldn't be too long, because even though she had not been included in the fire response command structure, she could tell tensions were rising, and she could see from the TV that the fire was spreading faster and faster as new plumes of smoke rose in thick spots that were previously green and clear. The clogged streets didn't give her a feeling of confidence the evacuation will be finished in time. Not to mention the fact that most of the roads going out of town were surrounded by forest as well. Chapter 64. Firestorm, A-Train. A-Train was bored. He'd been in a commercial shoot with Starlight when they got the call to rush them both halfway across the state to help out. Only there wasn't much help they could give as the evacuation was in progress, and it was obvious the man in charge didn't like them. His first instinct had been to leave and let the emergency personnel handle this whole thing, but Homelander had told them to wait for him there, and he wasn't about to go against Big Blue. Homelander had certainly changed in the past year, but one thing was still crystal clear. Insubordination was not tolerated. Some of the rowdier supes that had mouthed off during the retraining project had already felt the brunt of HL's displeasure. Not a pretty sight. Surprisingly, no casualties, but for some it might as well be the end of their careers. Some injuries weren't really recoverable. He'd seen Noir do some nasty stuff to some of them. Hell, he had to apply some of the accidents himself. Outside of his own personal fear, there was also the fact that Vought and by extension Homelander were creating the potential cure for his brother's paralysis, an event he wholly blamed himself for. He knew it was likely a long shot no matter what Homelander or the science nerd said, but he still had to have hope. He still needed to make things right for himself, for his brother, and most of all for his nephew and niece. It was how they looked at him now that hurt him the most. He'd been their hero, and now he was less than a hero, less than an uncle, less than even a family member. Their excitement to see him was gone. They wouldn't really talk to him, they treated him like a stranger, like someone to stay away from. It hurt him more than anything else he'd done so far. He couldn't bear how they looked at him. He had to make things right. So no slacking off for him. If Big Blue told him to jump, he'd ask how high, and if he told him to run, he'd only ask where and how fast. And if he told him to drop everything and rush halfway across the state to help, he would. Still, with no cameras in sight, a command tent that was obviously annoyed to have to put up with him there, he'd wisely let Starlight deal with that. She was captain after all, and not a lot of coordination of where to go and what to do there really wasn't much for him to do. He was both annoyed and relieved when the other speedsters showed up. Annoyed that he would now have to share the limelight, and relieved that he had someone else to talk to. Shockwave was his friendly rival in the media, and he knew the younger man had been the first pick as his replacement on the 7. Still, he couldn't hold it against him. The guy was a bro, trying to reach the top. Racer he knew from when he was young in his career, and even looked up to the older speedsters at one time. It was always a pleasure to talk to the mild-mannered man, though he was somewhat bland, likely due to his Midwest upbringing and persona. Blink, on the other hand, was new. The kid wasn't with Vought, but that didn't stop him from venturing out into superheroing antics on his own in his native San Diego. A-Train could tell the kid was very excited to be here, especially having received a call from Homelander personally. Why Big Blue called a non-Vought affiliated supe, especially one so young, was beyond him. Definitely not standard procedure. The only thing he could think of was that Homelander was trying to recruit the kid, but even then there were official avenues and procedures to go through. Still, it wasn't up to him to question the big guy. He'd leave that to Starlight. As he listened to Racer and Blink exchange stories, A-Train couldn't help but think back to how things had changed in the team. Working with Starlight had been good for both of them. He'd let her take the lead on the project, at first thinking he might be able to skate by with a few appearances, but soon enough found out that she drove hard and was on his ass constantly. She held him to deadlines and hadn't let him slack off. He'd attended every meeting, every storm braining session, met with every vendor, read all the materials no matter how boring they were, and put in all the late nights that were required. Between the projects, his training sessions with Ryan, and all his other hero responsibilities, he'd had little time to himself and to his family. He sighed inwardly as he thought it was probably for the best since relations were strained. Still, overall he felt quite proud of all that he'd achieved in the last year. A part of him thought for sure Homelander will take all the credit for the retraining project, but surprisingly he'd been very hands-off. Though, maybe he shouldn't have been surprised considering Homelander's space project, Vought responsibilities, and raising Ryan. His thoughts were interrupted by the landing of the big guy himself. Chapter 65. Firestorm, A-Train 2. Shockwave. Racer. Blink. Glad you could make it, Homelander said, addressing the other speedsters first. A chorus responded. Hey Homelander, Shockwave said with a nod. Glad to be able to help. Racer said calmly. Sir. Homelander, sir. Blink added excitedly. A-Train. Homelander said, turning to him. What's the situation? Starlight's in the command tent. Guy in charge goes by Nelson Bricks, isn't fond of us being here. Barely tolerates us. Our guys at Vought haven't been very helpful either since their teams can't get through. They were caught. We won't get much help from them. He interrupted. A-Train. This was impromptu on my call, it will take them some time to work through the official channels. It's just us here. We'll have to coordinate and work with the emergency personnel ourselves. A-Train saw he stopped and looked past him. Starlight was approaching with the fire chief. Starlight. Homelander. She said in acknowledgement. This is Chief Nelson Bricks. Chief. Homelander said, shaking the man's hand. Homelander. The pudgy chief said, a bead of sweat rolling no his temple. We are here to help. A-Train was catching me up on the situation, but I would like to hear it from the experts. Homelander said with command in his tone. A-Train saw that the fire chief was not too happy about it, but let it go. We've got a 10-mile front all on the length of the town. Fire is spreading quicker and quicker. The drought hasn't been helping. I've got everyone and everything doing all they can to slow the spread, but overall I give it about 45 minutes before we get into the danger zone. He said with reluctant confidence. And the evacuation? I saw from above the roads are all packed. Closes neighborhoods to the forest were first to go. But the way the wind is blowing and the rate the fire is moving, it might not be quick enough. Once the houses catch fire, it will burn through the neighborhoods quick, and even the roads going out are forested on the sides. He stopped briefly. The smoke is the real killer. Once the fire reaches town, the smoke will infest everything. It will be really bad for anyone trapped on the road. He stopped once more as the sound of his walkie-talkie went off. A-Train saw the man say a few words to his colleagues over the walkie-talkie, then turned back to their group. Inferno and Bright Flame should be here soon, 10 or 15 minutes. Homelander said. Their pyrokinetic abilities should be able to help contain any fire that starts within the town as long as they get to it in time. We could also Listen. Chief Nelson interrupted Homelander. I know you guys mean well, but we all know there isn't much for you to do now. This is serious business, not a PR stunt. People's lives and homes are at stake. Let us professionals take care of it. Let us do our jobs and don't get in the way. He paused briefly once more and looked Homelander directly in his eye. The only reason I'm even allowing you here is because I owe one to the governor. Now all I ask is that you let us handle this and stay out of the way. Your presence here is distracting enough, and I know sooner or later your little corporate stooges will want the cameras to be present, creating even more distractions. A-Train had to admit the man was ballsy. He even stepped off and didn't let Homelander to respond. Then again, the pudgy fire chief didn't know the real Homelander, only the media version. Wait. Homelander said to the fire chief. The evacuation. What if we can give you more time? We can slow the spread, maybe even contain it. Chief Nelson turned around. How? What if we could make a firewall, make a clearing, and remove everything flammable? How big would it have to be? You'd need a containment line of about 30 feet wide if we take into consideration the height of some of the trees, maybe a 50-foot clearing overall. But you'd have to do it over 10 miles in under 30 minutes. That's impossible. Leave that to us. Homelander said confidently. We'll take care of it. The chief just looked at him for a tense moment and gave in. Fine. As close as you can to the fire line is better. Got it. A-Train saw Homelander turn back to them. Starlight, you Racer and Blink stay here and wait for Inferno and Bright Flame to arrive. Coordinate with the chief on containing any fires if needed and help with the evacuation in any way possible. Then he turned to Blink. Blink, can I trust that you will follow Starlight and the emergency personnel's lead? Yes, sir, of course. The 15-year-old said excitedly. Excellent. We'll speak once all this is over. A-Train, you and Shockwave are with me, he said and sped off, giving them no chance to protest. Creator's thoughts. Chapter 66. Firestorm. A-Train 3. Had they not been soups, the heat and smoke would have been overwhelming. They soon stopped and were now maybe a few hundred yards away from the fire line, not that it was a straight line. A-Train saw that Homelander had stopped and looked all around in silence, with only the crackling of fire being heard. A-Train would bet that Big Blue was using his supervision, if he was a betting man, which he was. Homelander, what's the plan here, man? Shockwave asked. It took a moment for Homelander to respond. We'll start making a clearing from here, heading north along the fire line. I want every tree in a 50-foot radius to be taken down and pushed back. He pointed towards the town. We'll make sure to starve the fire once it reaches here. What? How? There's no way we can do that. Shockwave asked, shocked. A-Train saw Homelander look at Shockwave like he was a child. Shockwave, you are super strong, super fast, and incredibly durable. Push, punch, rip them out or cut them. Homelander said as he lifted his left arm and started oscillating it back and forth in short movements, going faster until it was a blur. The vibrating arm cut right through a tree like a hot knife through butter. A-Train was amazed. Wow! Shockwave was too. I don't think I can do that, the younger speedster said as he lifted his hand and tried to vibrate it the same way with mixed sputtering results. Yes, you can, Homelander said forcefully. And if you can't, you will learn now, he said as he closed the distance between them and grabbed Shockwave by the shoulder. You heard the fire chief. People's houses and lives are at stake, and you are a hero. Not because of your powers, but because in a time of crisis you step up to the plate. You understand? Homelander continued. His tone was dangerously low in contrast to the positive pep talk. A-Train could also tell that Homelander was squeezing Shockwave's shoulder just a bit too hard for comfort. We'll handle it, he said suddenly, out of guilty, interrupting Big Blue's intimidating pep talk. What about you? What are you going to do? Me? Homelander turned to him. I'm going to make a trench. It will be the line you two will follow to clear the area. Now A-Train was confused. How are you going to do that? He asked before he could stop himself. To his surprise, Homelander smiled at them and unclasped his cape, throwing far away to the side. By digging, of course. Before he could continue his line of questioning, A-Train saw Homelander hover above their heads in the air. To both of their surprise, they saw Homelander switch position, almost horizontal, body slightly angled so that it's not completely flat. Next, Homelander moved his hands above his head, looking like a diver, but with hands clamped together. He stood in that position for half a moment, then he started spinning. Within a moment he was spinning so fast he was blurry, and within a blink of an eye A-Train saw Homelander plunge into the ground. The sound was deafening. What the fuck? He heard the younger speedsters voice his exact thoughts. Dirt, rock, trees, everything was pulverized or thrown out of place with only a shallow trench left in place. The ground might as well have been putty against the force that was Homelander. He'd never seen anything like it. He didn't even know Homelander could do that. His thoughts were broken by the younger speedster. What do we do? A-Train looked at him and focused. Like Big Blue said. We clear out everything. He's the bulldozer, we're the clearing team. Scene break. Minnie Ashley opened her mouth to make a sound, but nothing came out. She remained slack-jawed. It appears that massive trail of destruction is Homelander along with Shockwave and A-Train. She heard the TV say over the practically yelling voices of the executives. He could do that? How come we didn't know this? My God, it's like a drill through jello. That wasn't in his files. How come we didn't know he could do that? I didn't know either. She barely registered the voice of her boss. Do you think he can do that through solid rock? He can crush steel like paper, so probably? How come we never used Man of Steel? She watched with morbid fascination as the tail of destruction split the forest, pulverizing everything in its path at astonishing speed, as if someone was drawing a black line on a canvas of green, the helicopter moving fast to keep everything in frame. Two blurs trailing behind cutting trees and chucking debris at also impressive speeds. Copyright, there's another soup. The exec's conversation continued all around her. If he could do that to the new bypass line being built. If only we were so lucky we could have it built this century. Ha! Tired of sitting in traffic? She heard a sarcastic voice, likely Rhonda's. We get who we vote for. Minnie Ashley shook her head and tried to clue in back to the conversation. Everyone was cracking jokes, but she could tell Ashley was thinking deeply and plotting. And, all right. So I wanted to show that there is more to VOT than just PR smoke and mirrors. They do actually have competent people and response strategies, and a whole structure where they do make their heroes do actual hero work and not just commercials and TV shows. Additionally, I wanted to expand a bit on VOT operations and that there is a whole org structure that does things like in any normal business. We also have HL/SI bypassing that whole structure because he can and doesn't want to wait for all the red tape process. As well, HL showing some leadership initiatives and working with other heroes, not only the 7. I specifically wanted to show that when HL calls you answer, a subtle tightening of HL's power and influence over other heroes. Some Starlight and A-Train thoughts on the past year. Wanted to showcase A-Train being loyal to HL as he's ridden by guilt. So HL has him by the balls. We can also see that for all VOT's efforts, not everyone is happy to have the heroes around. They don't fool everyone. HL showcasing new capabilities to show how much VOT was holding him back, but mostly how freaking lazy he was before. The HL/SI keeps training and pushing his boundaries, as well he is forcing other heroes to push their boundaries. In this case, A-Train and Shockwave. After all, super fast, strong and incredibly durable people can be used for a whole lot of applications. Winky face. As well, don't worry, there is an actual plot that will be building and an endgame in mind. But like I mentioned before, it will be done through snippets and time skips instead of a play-by-play story. Once again, thank you for reading and reviewing. Chapter 67. Contingencies I. Date: August 2023. Mallory felt bored indifference as she watched the analyst go over the video of Homelander turning the forest floor into Play-Doh. Up and down the 10-mile length 4 times in under 45 minutes. She fought the urge to slouch and yawn only out of sheer professionalism as everyone present, every agent, special agent, lieutenant, analyst, special analyst and all other fancy useless titles were sitting straight as rods, absorbing or pretending to absorb every single word. If we consider the additional trenches on the sides to contain the fire, then it becomes much. Mallory also felt old as she looked around the conference table at the faces that made up this little task force. Oh, the higher-ups were around her age, sure, but everyone else was 20 years younger at least. Not a bad thing necessarily. New blood was always good. Hopefully new ideas and new perspectives. The sheer destruction capabilities in such a short amount of time means we have to update it our. She was supposed to be retired, but it seemed there was always something that pulled her back in. The government had always kept a close eye on Homelander. Well, at least when the extent his capabilities started to sink into the brains of the national security types. She knew there were contingencies in place, plans to secure VIPs, the president, cabinet, important senators and other types in case Big Blue finally snapped. She didn't know what they were specifically, but she knew there was nothing like a politician trying to save their ass. Yes, enough about updating the damn Matrix response level. Special Director Bart Brown interrupted the presentation. Special Director. Because the only thing he was directing was this task force, which officially didn't exist, and technically no one on it was his direct employee, technically. Practically he could make or break most of these people's careers. One word from him and off to Antarctica you go for bird watching. What I want to know is how come we didn't know about this? I thought we knew all his capabilities. He asked the room at large. Well, sir, the analyst? Or was it special analyst or was it senior analyst? She couldn't remember and frankly didn't care. Technically he's not using any new powers, he's just applying his current powers differently. It's just an application of his flight powers and incredible durability, though we suspect his super and laser vision as well. And how come he's never done this before? We've had other terrible forest fires, we certainly could have used his help. One of the NSA reps asked. We don't know for sure, the analyst said, shrugging his shoulders. In the interviews he puts blame on the previous VOT leadership not letting him, though we suspect it's more likely tied to the changes he underwent in the past year. Which brings us to the other part of this little meeting. Brown said. The psychological and behavioral changes we've observed, Johnson? Mallory almost snorted. Thank you, sir. Another middle-aged man, Buzz Cutman, said, standing while the previous analyst took a seat. There were at least 4 Johnsons in this room alone. Why the agencies attracted people with that name was beyond her. In the past year we've observed an increased focus of obsessive behavior focused on work priorities both in the hero and corporate sides. Were they all just trying to prove something to make up for something lacking? Or did they feel that because of their names they could fuck the common folk by being spooks? Surprising competence in running VOT operations coupled with. Metaphorically, of course. Not that the CIA hadn't fucked America before. Christ, the things she did for this agency. All in the name of national security. What a load of crap. Sins she would never wash out. While showing restraint and exhibiting less narcissistic traits. She was practically responsible for the crack epidemic in black communities. Well, not only her alone. The agency at large, but she had a deadly hand in it. They didn't even let them traffic cocaine, but crack instead. All to make more money, to fight the commies. What a joke, she thought. They sold their souls for something as pitiful as money. The Soviets, who were paper bears to begin with. While more stable and less likely to have an episode, we believe that this change in personality coupled with new application of his powers. And that was only the crap she was directly involved. The other Black Ops nonsense she had at least indirectly touched would fill a whole graveyard of skeletons, let alone a closet. Which is why we continue to recommend a hands-off approach of only observation and cleanup for both Homelander and Dash. This time Mallory actually snorted out loud. His son. The analyst finished looking at her. The whole room was looking at her. Mallory got something to add? Brown asked with a scowl on his mouth. Oh, nothing, she started with derision. She was old and she wasn't even supposed to be here anymore. There was nothing Brown could do to her outside of killing her. Just that we had the perfect opportunity to take out Homelander over a year ago, she said, looking around the room. But in true government fashion, the operation was botched from the beginning. She immediately saw some of the gathered men puff up in indignation. Chapter 68, Contingencies 2. That was an unsanctioned, unauthorized operation by rogue agents. Justice and disciplinary action were swiftly applied upon their capture. One of the other Johnsons said, "Oh, cut the bullshit. You had the chance of a lifetime and botched it." She was tired of the games, and she was tired of the amateur bullshit. You all knew what Noir was capable of, and you went in half-cocked and underarmed. You should have Dash. What the hell were we supposed to do? The other man exploded, his face red. Bring down the whole fucking building. Hundreds if not thousands more could have died. She felt bitter inside. He was right, of course, but she couldn't stop feeling the bitterness. Leave it to the agency to grow fucking heart now. Where was this when pregnant women were dying of crack, or when armed guerrilla fighters raped their way through in installing banana dictators? You do what it takes. You finish the fucking Dash. Bang! The loud noise startled them all. Enough! Brown yelled. If you don't have anything constructive to say, then keep quiet. Both of you. Mallory saw the other man relent and leaned back in his chair while she rolled her eyes. Now if we are done with the psych profile, we move on to the next topic. Brown said, his gaze intense. The presenter sat down. Mallory, please, your report. She hated this. Not because she was technically spying on Ryan, but because of what she had to report. Ryan is doing well, and as far as I can tell, he is developing as a normal child for that age would. Homelander has. And she hated to say admit this. Proven to be a competent parent. His approach to Ryan has been well thought out and in line with what would be considered a normal working parent. If anything, I would say he is being somewhat strict. She paused and took a breath. He has restricted access to social media and the internet in general. It seems Homelander wants him to have as little screen time as possible. His days are filled mostly with tutors trying to bring his academic level. Like every kid ever, he both hates it and likes it. He'd rather play video games than do homework. She paused once again. Is he adjusting well to the new situation? Are they getting along well? Is he happy? One of the old-timers asked. She knew what he was getting at. Can Ryan be used against Homelander, or is he turning into him? He is adjusting as well as any kid could in this situation. His complaints about his father are, she really hated to say this, trivial in nature, typical of what any kid would have. Their overall relationship, I would say, is pretty good. I doubt any plans to turn him away from his would work at this point. And his powers? This time Brown asked. He practices them regularly with Homelander. I'm sure you've all seen him break the sound barrier in under 12 seconds. A chorus of nods was the response from the room. He loves flying and likes to practice it the most. Homelander has put him through various training programs at Vought to help him control his increasing strength. He's undergoing combat training with Noir and speed training with A-Train. He even spent a few sessions with Silver Kincaid. He says Homelander makes him regularly do target practice with his laser vision. She couldn't help but smile at her next sentence. Says he's better since his father is missing and hopefully that will be enough to keep the body count down. Brown said. The rest of the room agreed with him and she did as well. Ryan was growing fast and so were his powers. She could barely compare him to how he was when they were together. Back then he could scarcely use his powers both because he was afraid of what he could do and because he didn't know how to do it. Though it was also likely because he was now a year older and thus more grown up and stronger overall. We will have to adjust our contingencies to take him into consideration as well. Mallory didn't like the sound of that but knew it was necessary. While she couldn't see Ryan turning into his father, it didn't mean that the boy wouldn't help his father, whether it would be out of love or manipulation. The possibility is still there. Anything else to report? Brown asked pointedly. No, she said coldly. Nothing else. That is all she will give them for now. Not that there was much else to report, outside of Ryan's wish to attend school. But, fuck them, she thought, let the others earn their paycheck. Good. And the last thing on the agenda. Brown said, moving things along. We have an update on Compound V research facilities across the globe. Becker, take it away. Ever since the idiot Homelander spread V around the globe to terrorist cells, it was only a matter before countries got their hands on them and started their own research facilities. As discussed in our last presentation, out of the nations of concern, China and Iran have managed to synthesize stable formulas and are approaching human trials if they haven't already started. What an imbecilic move that was, she thought. The idiot might have doomed them all. God only knows what commies or the religious nutjobs will do with V. Chapter 69, Dreams. Ash fell on her skin. Dark clouds illuminated by the red hue of the wildfire blanketed the sky. Light covered her face and a mingling of voices carried by shadowy figures moving all around filled her ears. She blinked. It felt like an eternity. Two men were on the floor breathing heavily. Their colorful costumes were torn, burnt and melted, their skin glistening with sweat and dirt. Another blink, another eternity. She felt his presence. He descended from the sky, hair wild and dirty. His costume gone, his cape wrapped around his waist. An avalanche of heat engulfed her as he landed. He leaned in. His scars seemed to ripple in the red-tinted light. Her heart skipped and she blinked. Less than an eternity. She saw metal walls and felt pressure in her stomach. She was scared. A canine smile and sharp blue eyes met hers. Not one but two. They were cold and furious. His face was unmarked, perfect. She blinked again. Faster than an eternity. Two eyes turned into one, boring down on her. She felt heat. He'd just landed. Her heart skipped again. She blinked. Faster this time. A mocking smile met her. It was cold. She blinked. The image changed again. She felt heat. He was landing again. His gaze only on her and hers on him. She blinked. Blood drip drops splashing, blocking her view as is falling on a screen in front of her. Alex's face flashes in front of her and then the disembodied parts. Ah! She wakes with a scream. Her chest is heaving heavily and she's covered in sweat. She only hopes she hadn't messed the power to the tower this time. Every time she's had this dream her powers had activated and something had blown up somewhere. She regained her breath and steadied herself. A dream. No, this was a nightmare. How can she possibly think of him, of all people, like that? The heat was more than just from the fire. Author note: Starlight having weird dreams, winky face. Chapter 70. A Day in the Life of Homelander. Dena watched with curious fascination through the giant glass walls how Homelander was aggressively flailing around a plethora of diapers, closing and opening them while gesticulating wildly towards the crowd in what could only be anger and frustration. She wasn't the only one watching, of course. Everyone was doing their best to be inconspicuous from their desks, but she was the only one actually standing outside the giant see-through glass of the boardroom walls. That was only of course because she was early for the Seven's weekly stand-up meeting. Normally they would use the Seven meeting room on the top floor, however Homelander had made it an unofficial policy to once in a while schedule their meetings in other floors of the company, so the employees can see us. His reasoning was, smart move, she thought. It's always good to connect with the rest of the company, the rest of the people. Ever since she'd joined the Seven, she'd seen a lot of smart moves not only from Vought but specifically Homelander. He wasn't quite the man she'd seen in Maeve's memories, though he could simply be doing a better job at hiding it. Or as Maeve said, and something was wrong with him. Today's meeting wasn't one of those smart moves. The video conferencing system had crapped out in the Seven meeting room, so they had to reschedule to a different room. Whatever was happening was bad. Well, bad enough that Homelander was actually throwing a fit in public. Hey Silver Kincaid. She was broken out of her thoughts. Any idea what is going on in there? Golden Boy asked. No clue, she said, looking at the golden costumed young man. He was Maeve's maternity leave replacement, fresh out of Godalkin. The newbie settled into a crossed-armed position next to her. She had to admit, he looked good. No, not just good, he looked golden. Top of the class at GoDU, graduating 1 year early with honors, Dean's List, the works, and with charm and looks that made him a teenage girl's wet dream. It was another smart move by Homelander to snatch him up early. It's 10:07, he said slowly. Should we go in there, or is our meeting cancelled? Before she could answer, she saw Homelander turn to them and motion for them to join the room. Guess their meeting is over, she said, and opened the door, but Homelander wasn't actually done talking. Well, don't care how they either change their production or we change supplier. I don't care how much it costs, she saw him say to Josh, the head of product for Queen Maeve, as a portion of the room shuffled out. There are contracts we'd be breaking here. We can't simply change it on a dime, and even if we can make a change this fast, there's already hundreds of thousands, if not millions of units shipped. We'd have to dash. No, Homelander answered, frustrated. I don't want to hear this. We've already had this meeting with the ELT and the board. Everything related to the Seven has to be of superior quality, no generic crap, and especially, and I cannot stress this enough, everything related to Queen Maeve's baby brand, things that we are charging an atrocious amount of premium on. He paused briefly. These are good quality diapers, Josh said defensively. No, they aren't. You see how flimsy they are, size 4 and up. It's a completely different fucking diaper, Homelander continued. She and Golden Boy took a seat at the far end of the table. I can see this, and so can the fucking customers. You weren't the one that was just assaulted by a Korean grandmother in a grocery store and berated for 10 minutes on changing the damn diapers, Homelander said, and threw the diapers in his hand on the table. Josh looked repentant, ashamed, and sighed. We still have to take it to Ashley. This could cost us quite a bit depending on how we handle it. You let me worry about Ashley. I'll get in touch with her after she lands. Ashley was gone to deal with some issues with the park in Hong Kong, Dena remembered. Josh nodded and left the room, leaving them with Homelander. Where the hell is everyone? It's almost 10 past, he said as he turned to them. I've got 5 launches to do today, and first one starts at 11. Before she could answer, the door opened with Deep rushing in, phone in hand. HL, did you see the video? The Deep went straight to Homelander. What video? Golden Boy asked. Shit, it's out already? Homelander asked, leaning in over the Deep. Both her and Golden Boy joined him. They saw a portrait phone video of an old Asian lady yelling at Homelander in a grocery store while holding 2 small boxes of diapers. The words were explicit and embarrassing. Wow, Dena couldn't help but say. That old lady is really letting you have it. Fuck. And all I wanted was to buy some damn Gatorade. They all looked at him. I like the taste, he said, rolling his eye. So the previous meeting was about this video? Golden Boy asked. Yes, it was. Now never mind that. Where the hell is everyone else? Are they online? Dena saw him go start the TV screens. I thought everyone replied to be in to dashed. The door burst open again. Did you guys see the video? A-Train burst in. Ajuma versus Homelander? The Deep asked. Yeah, old feisty Korean lady. That is going mad viral. A-Train said. Not a good look, he said with an amused smile. Dena could see Homelander was getting annoyed now, differently than his previous frustration. Yes, they saw the stupid video. Now why are you late? He asked, annoyed. No, how are you late? You're the fastest man alive. A-Train looked sheepishly and said. I may have stopped for an extra bagel in the cafeteria. Oh, for fuck's sake. Where the hell are Starlight and Noir? It's almost a quarter after dash. Homelander was interrupted by his cell phone ringing. It's Ashley, he said and took the call. Hey Ashley. Yes, I saw the stupid fucking video. Dena saw him pause and heard rapid fire talking from the other side. So you just talked with product and legal? No, I don't care. We talked about this before. He continued while pacing. Dena could tell Ashley was trying not to lose her shit on the other side of that line. I don't give a shit how much it's going to cost. Well, he said and turned back to them holding the phone down to his chest. I've got to go, he simply said and headed to the door. Where? I'm going to pull them out of whatever meetings they are in now so they can tell me that to my face, he said, doing everything he could not to fully shout in the phone. Dena could see Starlight just turning the corner, coffee cup and laptop in hand. Homelander bumped into her, making her spill a bit of the coffee on herself. Captain, get your fucking team in order, Dena heard Homelander say without skipping a beat or stopping at all. No Ashley, I don't care, Dena heard him say as he rounded the corner. What the hell was that? Starlight asked, confused, as she entered the room. What's up his ass and where is he going? She made a move to get the napkins in the middle of the table. Before any of them could answer, the conference room door burst open once more. Noir silently strode in, one hand holding his phone and the other pointing at it. Starlight looked even more confused. You have to watch this video, the Deep said.